With the Godforge pieces secured in a box, the golden chest suddenly lost its glow. And in front of them, the stone brick walls parted ways, showing a dark tunnel that led on forwards. Once they entered this tunnel, they would get teleported into the next stage of the Red Ravine, where the major factions were currently embroiled in the expedition. With the Dragonborns raring to go, Michael stepped forward and was about to enter into the tunnel when he suddenly remembered something. He looked around him, only to notice that Fudge was nowhere to be seen. Finally, using his ability vision, he was able to see a stealthy little possessed stone brick start to approach the kneeling Night Guardian. "Fudge? What are you doing?" Once the possessed stone brick was near enough to the knight, Fudge suddenly jumped out and landed on top of the Guardian's head, and upon contact, Fudge's chest suddenly emanated a thread of ability power as he used his one and only ability to mark the Night Guardian with the devilish Shadow Diva. Fudge was trying to control it. Michael couldn't believe the audacity of the little ninja. He was actually trying to possess the Night Guardian. Since he knew that the Guardian contained the power of an 8th stage body formation magnetic, Fudge was most likely going to feel an intense backlash that could threaten his life. After all, he was only in the 1st stage. Michael immediately moved, ready to use up all of his ability power to execute a quantum step to save Fudge before it was all too late. However, he suddenly noticed something. Beneath the knight's feet, he saw its shadow suddenly morph into a circular form, with white eyes and a devilish grin. He stopped in his tracks. He couldn't believe it. It was working. Fudge was taking control of the Night Guardian. Slowly, the Guardian moved. It got up out of its kneeling position and held its sword in front. Then, its eyes opened, showing red irises. "Hee. I did it." "You, jump," Fudge commanded. The stone knight bent its knees slightly before jumping up in the air, landing with a quaking thud on the ground. "Isn't it cool, Master? I have a pet now." Michael was just speechless as he watched Fudge bark out order after order, with the stone knight loyally obeying him. He didn't even know how this was possible, given their extreme difference in cultivation levels. He looked towards the knight, peering at its chest with his ability vision. Once he got a closer look, he finally understood. It was true that this stone guardian had ability power embedded in its chest, one equivalent to the 9th stage of body formation. But it wasn't anything like a Godforge piece or a Dao heart at all. It was more like his battery. It only stored ability power in its body, allowing it to be powered like a toy. It didn't actually have any authority over its power, allowing Fudge to easily overpower it without any problem. Usually, the reason why a 4th stage magnetic couldn't use their ability on a 5th stage or higher was because the Godforge pieces in the 5th stage's heart had a natural defensive ability to guard against them. But this knight didn't have any of that. The ability power inside it was like a box of gold out on the street. Without a lock, anyone could easily pry it open and take the goods for themselves. Hee. With this, I can rule Metropolis, Fudge exclaimed. Michael could only sigh in relief once he realized that since this guardian was powered by some sort of battery, it would eventually run out of power. He was very glad that Fudge wouldn't be able to run amok controlling a puppet with a power equivalent to the major factions. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Red Ravine, 4 of the 6 major factions were currently present at the last stage of the Red Ravine. Beside them were a couple of other companies outside of Metropolis, who were well regarded even in the company of the likes of Alaric and the others. These groups of people were the elites of the elite. They were one of the strongest magnetics on the lower part of the Queen's region. And right now, they were gathered to have a discussion about how they were going to proceed with the last stage of the Red Ravine. "Congratulations on advancing to the nascent spirit, by the way, Alaric," greeted one of the men. "Thanks," Alaric replied. "You're moving up in the world. First, you've ascended to the next stage. And now, you're also becoming friends with royal blood vampires." Everyone took a sneak peek towards the corner of the room. There, they saw a group of 6 vampires huddled together, just blankly staring out in the open without doing anything. That was their way of taking a nap. "If you can get the royal blood vampires on your side, then I think you're about ready to finally leave Metropolis, aren't you?" asked one of the adventurers. Alaric shook his head. I haven't made that connection with them as of yet. You all know how hard it is to please those vampires. All they talk about is their deity. Everyone around him nodded. They had all tried and failed to strike up a conversation with the royal blood vampires. And each time it ended up in a complete and utter failure. They would always answer with only 1 or 2 words, completely cutting off the conversation. Well, we can't force them to cooperate with us. They don't have to. Right now, they were planning on a joint cooperative expedition for the last room in the Red Ravine. If they had the help of the royal blood vampires, then this would easily be completed in a few moments. Unfortunately, they seem to not be interested in any of that. They keep looking towards the entrance doors. One of the adventurers mentioned. Who are they waiting for? Alaric looked at the tunnel doors where they all came in. They're waiting for him. And just as they were about to ask him who this person was, they suddenly felt a disturbance in the air. They all turned to look at the tunnel doors and saw the darkness suddenly swirling with ancient power. There was someone coming in from the other side. Someone was able to defeat a guardian. Eventually, a man stepped forward from the tunnel. Alaric and the rest of them looked towards this newcomer. Their eyes widened. Besides the clothes filled with leaves and tree roots, the most eye-catching feature they had were the long, sharp ears that almost reached the top of their heads. It was an elf. Then more elves stepped forward from the tunnel, numbering about 10 in total. Everyone was flabbergasted at their sudden appearance. They never thought they'd see the elves before their appointed parade route. Immediately, one man quickly approached the elves in an attempt to be the first one to make contact with them. He thought this would be his opportunity to befriend them. But unfortunately, the elves simply walked past him. We're here for one thing, and one thing only, mithril relics. Mithril relics? Alaric muttered curiously. Excuse me, sir and madams, but what kind of mithril relics are you interested in? A female elf, middle-aged, wearing a circlet made out of intertwined wood, stepped forward. Take a guess, she said. Once Alaric took a closer look at the elves, he realized that his question couldn't be any more pointless. Every single elf had a bow strapped behind them, all of them a mithril relic of varying quality. So, it was very easy to guess what kind of mithril relic they were searching for. One of the male elves with tan skin with a muscular stature walked up and bowed. You are within the presence of the ethereal Farron, he said, gesturing towards the middle-aged woman next to him. She has traveled to the surface world in order to acquire a certain treasure that can only be found in this specific continent. If you are able to help us in our quest, then we will be willing to pay 10,000 sand dollars for your troubles, and more if we are able to achieve our goal. As soon as he said that, everyone immediately perked up. 10,000 sand dollars and more. That would put them well on their way to purchasing a drop of Sue, or purchasing a kilogram of Godforge. In this day and age of tourists, nothing was more important than the purchasing power of sand dollars. Practically everyone was trying to think of a way to earn more sand dollars in order to buy the things that would normally be impossible to buy using gold coins. So, everyone immediately offered their help. A mithril relic bow? I have one, said one of the adventurers. I don't have a bow, but I have a mithril relic spear that can be turned into an arrow. I'm willing to sell my own mithril relic for 50,000 sand dollars. It just so happened that some of the treasures found in the rooms before this stage contained mithril relics from the ancient era. There were a lot of people who obtained new mithril relics that they probably didn't even need anyway. So, if they could offload their new mithril relic and gain a few thousand sand dollars in return, then this would make the trip to the Red Ravine already worth it. The elves looked at the different mithril relics being offered in front of them. The elf called Farron stayed nonchalant, seemingly not interested in seeing any of the weapons being offered to her. It's not what we seek, she said. It seems that this expedition to the Red Ravine will have been in vain. It was a long shot anyway. Many were quite confused as to what the elves even wanted. After all, some of the mithril relics that they offered were of great quality, with minimal wear and minimal rust. Not only that, but there was one of them who offered an actual bow which was also in great quality. Alaric watched the elves with curiosity and noticed something. He glanced at the bows on their back and noticed that its quality was extremely superb. The presence of rust was very minimal, with some not having any at all. "They already have quality mithril relic bows," he muttered. "If so, then this means that they're trying to find something else. Something besides a mithril relic." With the elves not finding anything satisfactory, they quickly turned to leave. However, it was just then that one of the royal blood vampires moved. She bent down to her shadow and picked up a weapon underneath. "Is this what you're trying to find?" the royal blood vampire asked. It was a bow, one whose frame structure was as basic as it could get, without any decorations or carvings inscribed on it. Not only that, but the mithril quality on it was already quite degraded. It was almost fully rusted, having been unused for thousands upon thousands of years. The only thing that seemed to be in good working condition was its string. It seemed to be made out of twisted brown vine that hasn't frayed or unraveled despite the condition of the bow. Where did they get that? Some of the adventurers wondered. After all, vampires had no need for mithril relics, as they relied entirely on their own blood to fight. But then they remembered. The royal blood vampires had also gone through a room and defeated a guardian. They were able to defeat a guardian whose power was equivalent to the peak stages of the body formation realm. This meant that the treasures hidden inside it must have been of an equivalent value. However, the bow they acquired seemed to be quite low in quality. The mithril relics that some of the adventurers found were in much better shape despite the easy difficulty of the guardian they had to face compared with the vampires. But while everyone saw it as a piece of junk, the elves seemed to have seen something else entirely. "Royal blood vampires. Would you be so kind as to let me inspect that weapon, please?" Farron respectfully asked. As fellow beast folks, both vampires and elves were respectful and tolerant amongst each other. "Certainly," the female royal blood vampire answered. She quickly tossed the bow to the elf. Farron accepted the bow and held it with great care and respect. She ran her hand through the mithril relic and found it to be of genuine quality. Then, she turned her attention towards the string. She carefully moved her hand closer to the twisted vines. As soon as she made contact, both Farron and the string seemed to glow with the same green light. She relished in this moment before finally letting go of the string. "This is what we've been looking for," she nodded. "This is real darkwood. As expected, it has survived the test of time, even after being so far away from our homeland." "Darkwood," Alaric muttered to himself. He'd heard of that material before in books. As far as he knew, darkwood was something native only to the elven kingdom, where the great Yggdrasil tree was planted. And using both mithril artifacts and darkwood to construct bows, elves were said to have been able to shoot an arrow all the way across the world and hit a target as small as a grape. Unfortunately, it seemed that the elves were no longer able to produce darkwood in their native lands, making them lost in time. So that's why they're here in the royal continent, Alaric realized. They're here to recover darkwood left behind on mithril relics. Farron then walked over towards the female vampire and personally handed her the bag of $10 as payment. "I thank you for helping us recover our ancient treasure," Farron said, bowing her head. "I would like to return the favor someday. If I were to find any clues as to the lost religion of the vampires, then I shall immediately discuss it with you as soon as possible." The female royal blood vampire nodded. "That is much appreciated. We will be staying in Metropolis for the foreseeable future." Farron nodded. "I see. Well, we will also be heading there immediately. Shall we keep in contact?" "Cool. Fudge. Make him attack me. I want to see if I can defeat him," Zion said, reloading his biceps and ready to box. "Can't. He's gonna run out of battery," Fudge replied, turning his head away. Jakku then moved in between Zion and the Stone Knight. "Don't waste his energy, Zion. He's going to be my servant from now on." "Nope. He's going to be my friend. He's Grieve 2.0, Fudge said, sniffing, as if Grieve was already dead. Michael didn't know if Fudge knew that he'd be able to command the Stone Knight or not, but he was glad that it ended fine. At least now they have someone else amongst their midst who could fight in magnetic battles. In fact, 2.0 could even be considered as the strongest fighter in all of Reborn. Zion, stop messing around. We'll leave you behind otherwise, Shina said, already near the tunnel room. After Shina knocked on the heads of Fudge and Zion, they were all finally ready to enter the next stage of the Red Ravine. Michael stepped forth, entering the tunnel. But as soon as his body crossed the threshold, he suddenly felt a strange force tugging on his very soul. He immediately knew that something was wrong. This wasn't the same sensation as when he entered the first tunnel. It wasn't even the same as any teleportation spell. A normal transportation spell tugged on the body. But this one felt as if it was tugging at his Godforge piece. It was the same feeling as when he was using his quantum step. Michael saw himself inside a dark tunnel, with space twisting and creating a rift that pulled him forward. He felt as if he was riding through a wave without using a surfboard. Just his feet. Chat JK5. Get me out. He quickly ordered out. I'm sorry, Michael. There's no magical spell that can undo this teleportation. Why? It's because it's using ability power, Harbinger said. Whoever is doing this is extremely powerful, beyond even that of the nascent spirit realm. This was quite alarming to hear. He already considered Alaric as an extremely powerful cultivator despite being only in the first stage of the nascent spirit realm. But then, he found out that the individual doing this to him was magnitudes much stronger than that. Even his batteries wouldn't help with a confrontation with this being. Harbinger, is there any way we can get out of this? Maybe a new technique? Anything. Nothing would help, Harbinger said. But I wouldn't worry just yet. If they wanted you dead, you'd already be. As strange as that sounded, it did give him a little bit of a breather. Whatever this being wanted with him, it wasn't his death. This meant that he could possibly talk his way out of the situation. Wait, the Dragonborns. He looked behind him and saw that they were nowhere to be seen. He heaved a sigh of relief. At least he knew that they were safe. If it was just him, then he wouldn't have to worry about them. Master, where are we? Fudge swirled around his body, turning into a slimy slug shivering in fear. Fudge? How'd you get sucked in? I don't know, Master. I just saw you getting pulled away, so I quickly jumped on your shadow, Fudge said, peeking out of his shoulder. Michael felt warm after hearing that. Despite his flaws, Fudge was as loyal as anything could be. Just stay in my shadow for now, he said, patting the little slime. Don't show yourself until I say so. With how strong this person was, Fudge's stealth may very well be the same as using a flashlight in a dark room. But at least Fudge would stay near him, and he could protect him if anything happens. They continued to get pushed through the rift until eventually they reached the end of the tunnel. Michael shot through the other side, finding himself unable to stop as he skidded through the ground and smacking onto a hard wall. Ow! He groaned, massaging his head. Once he got his bearings, he raised his head and looked at where he ended up. He was in a hallway, adorned with nothing but black brick walls that seemed to have just been recently installed, with no sign of wear and tear. What's strange about this material was that it seemed to absorb all the light around it, making it seem as pure as darkness. The light source came from the flickering candles placed evenly along the pillars on the wall, and repeating three-tiered chandeliers on the ceiling. The design of the candle holders and the bricks around him made it seem like he was inside a dark castle. It seemed that whoever kidnapped him was a royal of some sort. Harbinger, you sense anything? I can only sense what you sense. They must be further inside. The space tunnel was gone, and the only thing behind him was a brick wall. So the only way was forward. He walked through the castle halls, with each step echoing through the walls. Master, I'm scared. Is that what a ninja would say? Michael joked, trying to ease the tension. I'm not a ninja right now. I'm just your pet slime. Michael chuckled, patting Fudge's head. He continued onwards before finally, he saw the end of the hallway. He walked through it, finding himself in a large room adorned with tall candle holders made out of black and gold. There was a red pathway leading to the front of the room, where there were a couple of steps leading up to a stage. He followed the path, walking up to the steps before he eventually found someone at the top. It was a girl with long, golden blonde hair, sitting against the wall, with her hands and legs tied up by black shackles bolted on the walls and the floor. There were cracks around the bricks where the chains were installed. She must have been trying to escape for a long time. Is she the one who called me? He didn't sense any power coming from the girl, certainly not something beyond the nascent spirit realm. It's her, Harbinger confirmed. And before he could ask any questions, he saw the girl open her eyes and look up at him. She blinked, her eyes trying to adjust to the light. And once his face became clear, her expression softened. You came, she said. What? He asked her. I called for you. I didn't think you'd come, she said. Michael looked back at her, confused. After all, he didn't come here voluntarily. It was more like he was abducted. So you were the one that got me here, he said. Yes, I think so. I just knew that I needed you, that you're going to save me. Save you? He asked, glancing at the shackles on her hands. How can I do that? If she can't get out by herself, then he definitely couldn't help her. If it could contain a being above the nascent spirit realm, then he had no chance in destroying it. It's easy, she said. All you have to do is... The blonde girl tilted her head. Ah, I forgot. Michael was speechless. He felt like he was dealing with another Grieve. She should be the one named Grieve 2.0 instead of that stone knight. What do you mean you don't know? The blonde girl tried scratching her head, but the shackles prevented her from reaching far enough. I don't remember anything. Then how did you transport me here? I just had a feeling. I knew you were going to save me, she said, looking up at him expectantly. So, you have no memory about how to get out of these shackles. Do you even know how you got here? Who imprisoned you? Who you are? The blonde girl shook her head. No, I don't remember anything. Michael was exasperated. He was suddenly thrust upon with the responsibility to free her, with no idea how to do it. He didn't even know if he should. What if by freeing her, he would unleash upon a great evil in the world that would kill everyone and himself? Though, after looking at that airhead expression on her face, he seriously doubted that. Just then, Fudge jumped out of his shadow and landed in front of the blonde girl. He looked at her curiously, tilting his blobby violet head, and the blonde girl mirrored his movements. There was a certain invisible connection that happened between the two, one that Michael wasn't entirely comfortable with. Nothing was ever as simple as it seemed if Fudge was interested in it. Master, I like her, Fudge declared. Hee, I like you too, Slime. I feel like you and I are going to get along, hee. Michael was now more sure than ever that freeing this girl may be a bad idea. If she got along well with Fudge, then that meant that she was probably as mischievous as he was. After all, birds of a feather flock together. Master, quick! How do we free her? Asked Fudge, already gnawing at the shackles. He put his hands on his waist. Just a second ago, you were so scared that your whole body was shivering in fear. What changed? Fudge flashed a cheeky smile. Hee. It's because I saw that she's not a bad guy after all. He sighed. Fudge was usually a good indicator for whether a person had good intentions or not, so he was more inclined to believe the little slime on this matter. All right, do your shackles have any locks? He asked, glancing at the chains restricting her movement. No, she replied. You have to break it. He touched the chains on the shackles, trying to determine its origin. As far as he could tell, the shackles weren't made out of any normal metal or material. ChatJK5, any ideas on what this could be? It took ChatJK5 a few seconds as she tried to analyze the material, which was quite weird since ChatJK5 never took more than a second to identify something. She had gone through 5 updates at this point, and each one only made her processing power a lot stronger. Yet, it took her more than 10 seconds to try and identify these shackles. The material used to create these shackles is not in my database. However, by looking at its molecular structure and cross-examining it with all other structures that have been stored in my memory, I am 99% sure that these shackles are made out of blood. Blood? How's that even possible? He quick-cast a solid 6-star earth ball spell and flung it towards the chains bolted on the wall. Aside from a few dust on the wall, the chains remained in pristine condition, with no scratches whatsoever. These chains seemed to be as durable as that of mithril ChatJK5 deduced. It was hard to believe that such a strong material could be made out of blood. It has ability power. Lots of it, said Harbinger. It's not being reinforced by it, but it is ability power in and of itself. After realizing the durability of these shackles, he was starting to wonder about the blonde girl's true identity. Who was she, and why was she imprisoned with shackles that only someone beyond the nascent spirit realm could destroy? Or more importantly, who could imprison her here? Is it just you here? He asked her, cautiously looking around the room. Whoever imprisoned her here wouldn't be so happy to find someone trying to break her out of her shackles. I think so. When I woke up, I hadn't seen anybody else, she said. When you woke up? And when was that? She shrugged. I don't know. I think it's been a long time. A normal human being wouldn't be able to survive for more than 5 days without food or water. But judging from the cracks and the wear and tear of the walls from the girl trying to free herself, it looked like she'd been here for more than a month at least. So, she was probably a cultivator or a magician. It was possible that she was able to sustain herself through the natural mana in the air. I have a better way of estimating the time, Michael. How? Please head down the stairs and let me analyze the candles all around the room. That was a brilliant suggestion from ChatJK5. He'd be able to see how long time had passed from how much the candle had melted. He headed down the stairs and saw candles resting on tall holders half the size of a normal human. There must have been hundreds of them. Once he was near, ChatJK5 showed her calculations. The candle wax is made out of an ancient material that was known to last for thousands of years. Wait, thousands? And since the candles have already melted more than halfway through, it is safe to conclude that 1,000 years has passed since the candles were first lit up. He was speechless. 1,000 years? Could the blonde girl really have lasted in this prison for 1,000 years? So, then who really was she? She definitely wasn't a normal human. She could only be part of the beastfolk race, since they were the only ones with extended lifespans that could reach up to the thousands. I'm rushing to conclusions. The candles have lasted 1,000 years. But it doesn't mean that she has also been in here for that long. Still, there was a part of him that believed her to be some kind of semi-immortal being. After all, she was special enough to be imprisoned here with shackles made for beings above the nascent spirit realm. He walked back up the stairs, still reeling from the discovery. Then he saw Fudge and the blonde girl giggling to themselves, seemingly having a great time. Really? Yup. I'll show you later, Fudge promised. He didn't know what they were talking about, but it definitely wasn't good. Master, can you free her now? Please. He was going to say that it was impossible because the shackles were indestructible to low-level beings like him. But then Harbinger gave him an idea. You have something that can damage it. Your unity weapons. He perked up. If there was something that could damage ability power, then it was definitely his unity beams. Michael reached down his shadow and picked up a switch. And as he flicked it open, the unity beam shot up and created his unity saber. The blonde girl looked up at the unity beam, her eyes flashing with familiarity. I knew it. You're going to save me, she exclaimed. He immediately noticed her reaction. You know what this is? He asked, waving his unity saber around. She opened her mouth to say something, but soon showed a confused face as she failed to remember what she was trying to recall. I think so. I just know that you're going to save me with that weapon. She somehow knows what unity is. No modern human aside from researchers even knows of its existence, right? That is correct. After a cataclysmic event that fractured the Godforge into pieces, the ancient humans have also lost their ability to wield all 8 elements, making unity lost in time. The fact that she seemed to know what unity meant was that she was either a researcher who dug up ancient records, or she personally witnessed ancient humans wielding it herself. Is she really 1,000 years old? Who really is she? Master, look! Your sword is melting the shackles. Fudge exclaimed happily. Unbeknownst to Michael, just having the Unity Saber in close proximity to the shackles would start its melting process. The chains were starting to sweat blood. He quickly switched off his Unity Saber, stopping the shackles from melting any further. "Why did you do that, Master? She was going to be freed. I don't know what's going to happen once she's freed. Maybe her captor would immediately notice it and try to kill us," he said, cautiously looking back towards the hallway where they came from. He wasn't going to do anything drastic unless he had an escape route ready. Somehow, this Gothic castle was cutting him off from the world, preventing him from accessing the shadow clones he left everywhere. He wouldn't be able to teleport to safety whenever he wanted. If he was going to free her, then he needed to find the exit doors first. That way, he knew where to go if something awry happened. Just then, a drop of blood continuously traveled through the chain and onto the shackles attached on the blonde girl's wrists. It continued to flow downwards until finally, it dripped towards her skin. And immediately, the blood got absorbed into her skin. She jolted up, her eyes flashing golden for a brief moment. "What happened?" he asked her. The blonde girl looked at the chains on her hands, and he saw that the look on her eyes had changed. Just a few seconds ago, her eyes reflected confusion and bewilderment, as if she had absolutely had no idea about anything around her. But now, there was a tinge of clarity in her look. She eyed the shackles on her hands with curiosity, not one of wariness. It was as if she no longer treated the shackles as something that restricted her. I think I remember now," she muttered. "You know who you are?" She shook her head. "No, but I remember the shackles." Then, she looked up at him. "You don't have to worry about escaping. No one's going to chase after you." "Really?" he asked, with a hint of doubt. How can she be sure if she doesn't even know her own name? She nodded. "Yes, trust me," she said. Fudge nudged at his legs. "She's telling the truth, Master." After mulling it over for a few seconds, he decided to trust them on this one. If Fudge trusted her enough to give him his word, then that was enough for him. "All right," he said as he clicked his Unity Saber on. "You better be right." He raised his weapon above his head and brought it down towards the chains, shattering it into 100 pieces. The broken pieces of the chain immediately melted into blood, creating a splatter mark all over the walls and the floor. A white fire then erupted on the ends of the broken chains, spreading forwards and continuing to melt the frozen blood chain into its liquid form. It wasn't long before the shackles on the blonde girl's wrist melted, freeing her from one of her restraints. With another swing, he broke off the chains connected to her legs. And with one after the other, he destroyed all 4 chains that restricted her 4 limbs. The blonde girl fell forward, the chains no longer binding her to the walls. She massaged her wrists. A relieved smile spread across her face. She was free. Then, she looked forwards and saw the pool of liquid blood splattered all around the floor. It flowed towards her, like a river branching off into a new territory, and eventually it reached her finger. As soon as it got absorbed into her skin, her irises suddenly turned golden and was accompanied by an aura that burst out of her body. Michael covered his eyes, feeling the pressure of ability power like the chaotic wind from a storm. The liquid blood continued to flow towards her skin, and with each drop that she absorbed, she seemed to get stronger and stronger. Finally, she found the strength to stand up. Despite being shackled for what looked like thousands of years, her body became incredibly healthy just from absorbing the blood from her own shackles. Her skin started to shine, with the grime, oil, and dirt getting purified from the golden aura she emitted. And as her body got stronger, her absorption also followed along with her. The blood on the ground swirled upwards and splashed towards her body, her entire skin. Even as she floated off the ground, the blood continued to follow her like she was a magnet. Finally, the last drop of blood got absorbed into her skin, resulting in a surge of aura that exploded outwards. The breeze washed over the entire room, with the candles getting extinguished. This should have resulted in complete darkness. Yet, the blonde girl's entire body was glowing in a golden light that illuminated the entire room. and somehow her light revealed etchings on the floor and the walls. He squinted his eyes. Those looked familiar. However, it didn't last long enough for him to properly take a good look. Finally, the blonde girl floated down, and the light on her body subsided. "What just happened?" he asked her. She looked at him, and he noticed that she seemed to have gotten taller. It was as if she grew a few years in age. Aside from that, there wasn't that much difference from when she was imprisoned. "I remember now," she said, looking at her own hands. "No one imprisoned me here. I did." "What?" She nodded. "Yes. I used my own blood to shackle myself in this place. As for how or why, I don't know. But I do know that the only way I was getting out was if someone with the right power saved me. Someone like you," she said, pointing at the unity saber in his hands. Michael looked at her, trying to discern her true identity. Somehow, he had a feeling as to who she really was. He had no true way of finding out the blonde girl's true identity, especially if she didn't even know who she was. But judging from the clues he gathered up to this point, he could make an educated guess. First, she seemed to have been trapped here for at least 1,000 years. This would mean that she must be some kind of human with an extremely long lifespan if she looked this young while being more than 1,000 years old. Then the blood. Those shackles, which seemed to be as strong as mithril, were made out of blood and had an ability power exceeding even that of the nascent spirit realm. If she made those shackles for herself, then that would mean that she could wield blood as her own power, and that her true strength would be something that he couldn't even yet imagine. Blood, immortality, just from those two clues alone. Is she a vampire? An even more bolder thought came to his mind. The original vampire? After thinking of this, he glanced at the blonde girl again, remembering what Guillermo and the other vampires said about the original vampire. According to the depiction they had sculpted on the Iron Maiden Church, the original vampire seemed to be a figure with immortal beauty and wisdom, with serenity and purity that could rival even that of an angel. But when he looked at the blonde girl, he couldn't help but see her as nothing but a brat, especially with her colluding with Fudge like two mischievous little kids planning a prank. "Hee. I'll show you the ropes when we get home," said Fudge, already treating himself as the senior. "I can't wait," she replied. "You must teach me more about this ninja stuff. It sounds so fascinating." Michael quickly shook his head. No, she can't be the original vampire. He couldn't believe it. He didn't want to. Either way, there was no way for him to learn about the truth, so there was nothing that he could do. He would simply treat her as another ally that he had to keep a close eye on for any hijinks that she could do. Hey, does the word original vampire mean anything to you? Does it ring any bells?" he asked her just to make sure. Thankfully, she shook her head. This looked like the first time she'd ever heard of such a term. "No, I don't know anything about that. What's a vampire?" "They're the inferior version of a ninja," said Fudge. "Don't worry about them and just focus on being a good female ninja, or a kunoichi. Wait, you don't have a name yet, right? Why don't we call you Kuno?" The blonde girl considered it for a moment before innocently nodding her head. "Kuno. I like that. Kuno's my name." Kuno seemed to really like her name, as she repeated it to herself many times, not wanting to forget it. "It's good that you have your own name now, but it's better if you don't forget about your true identity," he reminded her. "My true identity," Kuno muttered. I think I can remember more of my past if I absorb more of that blood." She only regained a piece of her memory when the blood shackles melted and got absorbed into her skin. It was safe to assume that if she got more of that blood, then she'd be able to remember more about her life before the amnesia. Unfortunately, there didn't seem to be any more blood shackles lying around. "There's more of them," Kuno insisted. "But I forgot where they were. I just know that there's more of that blood out there. I think I left it all over the place for me to find." Michael wondered what kind of life Kuno must have led before her imprisonment. If she had to fracture her own memories and store them in her own blood shackles to imprison herself for 1,000 years, then what happened to her to lead her to such drastic measures? All those questions would only be answered by Kuno, and Kuno alone. He had to find those solidified blood shackles somewhere around the world, because of course, She doesn't remember where she put them. Chat JK5, if I lose my memories, then please make sure to put them in one place where I know I can retrieve them. Understood. Saving that preference for the amnesia protocol. Whoa, I was just joking. But you really have that setting? Yes. I have set up a lot of protocols for multitudes of scenarios that may not even happen. There's a protocol for when you die, one when you suddenly turn evil and take over the world, and one where you decide to sire children with a harem of women. What? Ooh, a harem? I kinda like the sound of that. Michael felt whiplash after hearing that. I would never do any of those things. Even so, I have made multitudes of protocols to execute for any possible case that may come up. But just for your information, I will always help you in all choices you may or may not eventually take. TCH. Kiss ass. Twerp. Michael immediately got out of the void inside his mind. Somehow, the conversation turned into harem when he was just talking about Kuno's true identity. Let's get out of here, he said to them. Now that Kuno was free, there was no reason for them to remain here in this gloomy castle. Okay, I'm ready, Kuno said, pumping her hands in excitement. Teleport us. Teleport us. Michael and Kuno both looked at each other. That was my line, he said to her. Huh? She asked, tilting her head. Michael dropped his head down and sighed. You know, I can't get out of this place, right? Kuno shrugged. I don't know. You teleported me here, he said to her. Can't you also teleport me back? But as usual, the blonde-haired girl just had that airhead stare out into nothingness as he tried to talk to her. He walked over to the walls and touched the black bricks making up the whole castle. Even without using his ability vision, he could feel the pulse of ability power coursing through the walls. It was actively preventing him from contacting the outside world and teleporting himself with his shadow clones. The worst part was that the power on the walls was way above the body formation realm. None of his abilities or magic spells could get them out of here. Shat yi ko fem, Harbinger. Any ideas? Touch the wall again, said Harbinger. I want to check something. He did as Harbinger said and put his palm against the cold, dark, brick stones. Thankfully, the walls aren't that thick. Beyond it is just nothing but ordinary rocks underground. If you could use your quantum step to phase through it, then you can use the phase-through ability of your drone to pass through the solid rock everywhere and emerge to the outside world. Easy peasy. Despite such a simple solution, the execution for it was something else entirely. After all, he was still in the 4th stage of body formation. Even using all of his ability power, he still couldn't get a single charge for his quantum step. We're trapped here, he realized. He needed to charge his batteries to at least 30% if he wanted to perfectly execute the quantum step. Any less than that and he'd have to worry about passing out after, which wasn't good since he'd still have to navigate through the underground rock surrounding the castle with his drone, and he couldn't do that if he was unconscious. Unfortunately, there was no easy source for energy anywhere around this place. Fudge was still in the 1st stage of body formation, so anything he created would only result in 0.001% charge. As for Kuno, he doubted if she could even throw a punch. Her head was so messed up from the amnesia that her body-eye coordination was completely off. She couldn't even stand up without her body tilting one way or the other. The only other source was the walls itself. However, he'd have to dig through the very stone itself to get to the main source of power that made it so durable and siphon off the ability power inside it. But if he was able to do that in the first place, then he wouldn't have to worry about phasing through it at all. One solution could be to power the batteries himself. He'd drain his own Godforge piece, store it in his batteries, and wait for his ability power to refresh. However, that would take time. A lot of time. Harbinger. How long do you think it would take? A week minimum. The fact that we're so secluded in this castle makes it that much harder to regain ability power. Honestly, that time frame wasn't bad. At least he knew that he could get out given enough time. However, he was worried about the Dragonborns. He didn't know where they ended up. They could have been thrown off somewhere in the tunnel and ended up halfway across the world for all he knew. In order to save them, he needed to get out of here as fast as possible. But where am I going to get the necessary charge? Meanwhile, back in the Red Ravine, Shina and the rest of the Dragonborns felt themselves caught up in a tide of crossing spacetime continuums, getting tossed around and rummaged like they were dirty clothes in a beat-up old washing machine. They couldn't even make heads or tails about their own bodies. All they could see was darkness everywhere. They had no frame of reference, making it seem as if they were just standing still even though they could feel their blood pooling from their heads to their toes. Shina immediately tried to fight the force and steady her body. But unfortunately, the power acting everywhere around her had a tinge of ability power, making her completely susceptible to its attacks. Fighting the urge to vomit, she peered through the darkness to find her siblings. She was starting to worry, but thankfully, she could still hear them out in the distance. Ha 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 ha. I'm so dizzy. Zion giggled. Erg, I want to lay down, Jaka said, retching. Oh. Shina instinctively wanted to throw a shoe at Zion. Even though they were in such a precarious situation, the boy still had the gall to be so carefree. This was no time for jokes. As for Amisu, Shina knew that her little sister must be so anxious right now. If they couldn't hear each other right now, she probably would have already crashed out. And Jaku, who was supposed to be the eldest of them all, was of no use. He couldn't be relied on unless he was laying down in a bed. As usual, she had to be the one to step up. She was the only one who could. I have to save my siblings. I have to save Lord Michael. The very person that they relied on, the very pillar of their company, Michael, was suddenly yanked away from them by a strange force. She tried to catch up to him, but he was long gone by the time she entered the transportation tunnel. And because they were caught up in the wake of his abduction, they couldn't even worry about where he went off. With him gone, they had to get out of this mess by themselves. And Shina took it upon herself to be the one to step up. She had to. She took out her mithril artifact compound bow from her back and tucked it under her arm. And using her other hand, she conjured a magical arrow with a string tied to its bottom. With this stringed arrow loaded in her bow, she notched the string backwards and pointed ahead. Make a sound, she told them. What? Jaku answered back, confused. Bwee, Zion said, making a face. Here. Amisu muttered loudly. She used the echoes of their voices to triangulate their exact positions and aim for their clothes. This would have been an easy feat in the real world, but unfortunately, not only was Shina tumbling around like a car wheel, but she also couldn't see anything past her own hands. She had to consider her own trajectory, as well as their trajectory as they got tumbled along the space rift. After taking a breath, she aimed upwards, 44.2 degrees northwest. Even though she calculated her aim with exact precision, the pressure was still getting to her. Her whole bow was trembling as she pulled the strings as tight as she could. Finally, she released her string with a twang. The arrow flew across the dark space, leaving behind nothing but a glowing string attached at its nock. Zion was tumbling around, when all of a sudden, he heard a whistling sound from his right ear. He turned around and saw the arrow coming straight for his head. Ei! He ducked, and the arrow shot through his collar and entangled it with the string. The arrow continued onwards, curving and aiming towards Amisu. The green-scaled Dragonborn had her eyes covered with her hands, not even noticing that the arrow had shot through the lower hems of her shirt. And finally, the arrow shot towards Jaku, aiming for his collar. However, a sudden rift in space created an upward draft, with the arrow overshooting a meter above his head. Catch it, said Shina. But Jaku seemed to be too lazy to jump up as he simply yawned and let the arrow pass through him. Then, he took out his scabbard and hung it above the string tied to the arrow, creating a makeshift zipline. Yawn. I'm fine, he said. Shina shook her head as she saw the arrow loop back around her. She quickly caught the arrow with her bare hands and tied the string around her waist. And with a simple pull, she yanked her Dragonborn siblings closer to her, allowing them to finally see each other again. Sis, Zion cheered. You're the best. But instead of celebrating, Shina heaved a sigh of relief. They weren't out of the woods just yet. Don't move, Just hang on tight, she commanded. Then, she took the tied string again and aimed it forwards. Using her full strength, she shot the arrow, letting its momentum pull them all away from the current of the rift. Shina found herself tumbling forward as they exited the tunnel rift. With ability power no longer surrounding her, she was able to use her arrow and stick it onto the ground, stopping her momentum entirely. She looked around and saw the rest of her siblings landing safely, skidding across the stone ground. Relieved, Umisu muttered. Erg. Finally, a bed, Jaka muttered, kissing the floor and immediately taking a nap. Woohoo! I want to do that again, Zion cheered as he laid on the ground. Good job, sis. However, his celebrations were just met with a swift knock on the head by Shina. Ow! What did you do that for? He complained. Shina pursed her lips. We were at such a dangerous spot, yet you were still acting so carefree. And you, Jaku, you almost missed the arrow because you weren't paying attention. You were just trying to take a nap. And Amisu, I love you, but you gotta speak up more. I almost missed it because I couldn't hear your voice. She huffed and puffed all of the feelings she had deep inside, leaving her all worked up in the end. Everyone looked at her, surprised. Shina was always uptight and strict, but she was never this stressed that smoke almost came out of her ears. Her white scales were almost turning into beet red as she let out all of her complaints. And she definitely wouldn't be shouting at Amisu of all people. Whoa, sis, relax, Zion said, chuckling. We made it out alive, didn't we? That's the most important part. I gotta agree with Zion on this one. You're making Amisu sad, Jaku said, with Amisu hiding behind his shoulders. Shina pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. She just couldn't understand why her siblings weren't being more serious about the situation. While she was being super stressed about this situation, her siblings weren't exhibiting any kind of seriousness to the whole situation. First and foremost, she had to worry about making sure that they were all safe. And secondly, she had to worry about rescuing Lord Michael. As his attendants and personal guards, it was their duty to make sure that no harm would fall onto him. They had already failed by the mere fact that they let him be abducted right in front of their eyes. Their first priority should be his retrieval, but because they were so weak, they had to worry about their own survival first. I'm already worried about a lot of stuff, just don't add on to my stress, she said to them. We have to find out where we are, and where Lord Michael is so that we can rescue him. Jaku stood up and patted her shoulders. You don't know Boss well enough. He doesn't need our help. He can manage all on his own. I'm betting he's even more worried about our safety rather than his own. Yup, Bro Mike is super strong, Zion added. Super, Amisu muttered. We just have to worry about our own safety, Jaku said. Shina understood what he was saying. However, there was still this underlying pressure she felt that she could not lift off of her shoulders. It was grasping her body, making her movements tight. Fortunately for us, it seems that we didn't get transported that far, Jaku said, looking around the room. They were located inside a hallway made out of irregularly sized stones fitted together through thousands of years of natural formation. They were still in the Red Ravine. The biggest evidence of this was the fact that they saw multiple buddings of mushrooms growing around the cracks of the stones, making him realize that they were near the mushroom forest. Where are we? Zion asked. Shina peered forward, squinting her eyes. She saw that the end of the hallway led to a much bigger open room, one similar to the one that they just left. And with her sharp ears, she could hear sounds of activity. Crashing rocks, clinking metal, and hurried shoutings of groups of people. We're entering into one of the tunnel rooms, she realized. We were transported back. She immediately ran towards the end of the hallway, with her other siblings following suit. As they left the hallway, they found themselves standing on a large cliff that led down into a dark chasm. Beyond that, on the end of the room, she saw a platform that led to a tunnel that let out a huge amount of light. Hit him. I can't. He's too fast. Its movements are unpredictable. Just tens of meters away from them, they saw a group of about 7 humans facing against a giant bee-like creature floating above an abyss. That was a guardian. and the human adventurers were trying to defeat it. One of the female adventurers looked back, noticing the Dragonborns. "Where did you guys come from?" It doesn't matter. We need your help," she pleaded. "What's wrong?" Shina said, immediately moving forward. "You see that guardian? It's called the Mockingjay, and it's a relatively weak guardian. As long as we defeat it, a bridge would form that would let us cross to the abyss and finally get out of the Red Ravine. However, it's extremely fast and all of the movements do not conform to normal reasoning. We can't hit it at all. Please help us. We're just total beginners who thought we could challenge the Red Ravine, but we're totally wrong. We can't even defeat the weakest ones." This was one of the dangers of the Red Ravine. Once you enter one of the tunnels, the only way that you were going out was if you defeated a guardian in one of the rooms. And through a lucky coincidence, the Dragonborns were teleported right at the exit of the Red Ravine. They only had to go through the guardian called the Mockingjay, and they would be able to get out of this place. And according to these adventurers, this guardian was one of the weakest too. Shina looked up at the Mockingjay and saw its human-like face upturned like a clown. It seemed to be mocking the humans for not even being able to graze its fur. "Hikhikhik." The Mockingjay laughed as a fireball shot way past above its head. None of these adventurers specialized in ranged attacks. They all brought with them swords and shields, which only goes to show how thoroughly unprepared they were for the Red Ravine. "This is great," Zion said. "My sis can hit any target even if it was a kilometer away. This little bee won't stand a chance against one of her arrows." Everyone looked at Shina. They saw the bow on her back and hope returned to their faces. Finally, an archer, the only person that could save them from this problem. "Go on, sis. Don't be shy," said Zion, nudging at Shina. "This is target practice for you." Her siblings knew her capabilities well enough to know that she could hit this Mockingjay in her sleep. Jaku even laid down and just waited for the inevitable to happen. "Just wake me up when you hit it." "Shoot, shoot," Amisu cheered. With everyone looking towards her, Shina slowly took out her bow. Shina loaded her bow with a simple arrow. The Mockingjay had no armor at all in order to be as light as possible for maximum speed and aerial maneuverability. As long as she could shoot it in one hit, the fight would be over. She pulled on the string, bringing it back towards her shoulders. All of her training, her talent, and her skills allowed her to not even consider this as a real challenge. It was no exaggeration that she could hit this in her sleep. There was no reason for her to feel so anxious, to feel so stressed. But as she looked up at the Mockingjay, it started to cackle at her. "Hikhikhik. You're useless." Her hands started to shake. The usually firm and stable form that she was so proud of started to waver, as if this was the first time that she was ever holding a bow. "Don't listen to its taunts," one of the female adventurers. "That's its ability power. It can peer deep down into your mind and use it to its advantage." There was a reason that this guardian was called the Mockingjay. It was fast and it was cocky. It would laugh and taunt you, making you miss your shot. And once you fell into that trap, there was no going back. This was a really good combination against someone with a weak mental state. "What are you doing, sis?" "Shoot it," Zion said impatiently. He didn't know why she was hesitating on releasing her shot when the Mockingjay was staying in one place. Even he could shoot it, and he couldn't even hold a bow properly. Shina took a big breath. It was only now that she truly missed the easing presence of Lord Michael. Without him, she felt all the burden of pressure on her shoulders. She tightened her grip on the bow, trying to forcefully conquer her shaking hand. But it didn't work. Continued to shake even harder. "Focus," she said to herself. "You have to save everyone." She looked up at the Mockingjay and released her bow. But as she did, her trembling hands forced a micro-adjustment to the arrow's trajectory that slowly snowballed, letting the arrow fly tens of meters off course. Shina's shot flew past the Mockingjay's head before arcing down and plummeting to the abyss. "Hikhikhik. I even made it easier for you. And you still missed." The guardian buzzed around in triumph. It only further drove the stake of insecurity and doubt on Shina's already fragile heart. cackled, knowing that the fight was already over. Once its target fell to that cycle of despair, to that cycle of self-doubt, there was no way for them to recover. "Sis?" Zion muttered, confused and concerned. This was very uncharacteristic of her. She had never missed a shot that far wide in her entire life. Even Jakku got up from the ground, forgoing sleep. Shina was missing her shots. That was so surprising that it released the drowsiness in his body. "It's okay," Omisu muttered to her sister. She walked up to Shina, about to give her a reassuring hug. However, Shina quickly pushed her away, surprising Omisu and the other Dragonborns. "I can do this," she said. "My hands were just slippery, that's all." She took out another arrow from her quiver and loaded it in her bow. She pulled on the string even tighter than before, but still the result was the same. As soon as she released her shot, the slight trembling of her hands caused the arrow to fly astray from its true intended path. The mockingjay once again laughed. It didn't even need to use its immense speed to dodge those arrows. They were way off base. Feeling rage and frustration building up in her heart, Shina took out arrow after arrow, shooting them towards the mockingjay in quick succession. And with each one of them, her aim seemed to get worse and worse. "Sis, what's happening with you?" Zion bursted out. "Why can't you hit such a simple target?" Jakku immediately pulled him off of Shina. "That's enough," he said. Then he turned to Shina. "Is there something wrong? You can talk to us," he reminded her. However, Shina shook her head, refusing to elaborate. She forced herself to keep shooting, trying to conquer the trembling of her hands. Yet, everything she did only seemed to make things worse. Meanwhile, a tunnel suddenly manifested on top of the cliff as a group of people walked out. But as it turned out, these groups of people were not normal humans at all. They wore plant-based clothes and had their wooden bows slung across their back, and perhaps their most distinct feature, their elongated ears. These were the elves. After obtaining the darkwood they needed from the Red Ravine, they immediately made their way towards the exit. And coincidentally, they landed on the very same cliff that the Dragonborns and the adventurers were trapped in. "Lady Farron, they seem to be quite troubled with this guardian," said one of the tan-skinned elves. The middle-aged female elf took a simple glance at the current situation and saw the mockingjay's weakness in one go. "Shall we help them?" one of the elves asked. They seemed to be in great need of a ranger. And of course, elves were well known for their speciality in ranged attacks. Defeating this guardian would be as simple as breathing to them. "Oh, it seems that they have a ranger already," said one of the elves, pointing towards a certain white-scaled dragonborn wielding a strange bow. Then they saw Shina load an arrow into her bow and shoot at the mockingjay with extremely bad precision. "Oh, she must not be a ranger then," said one of the elves. "It seems that they do need our help." They all turned towards Farron. With one word of hers, one of the elves would release the arrow in bows and defeat the mockingjay in one shot. However, Farron shook her head. "This is not our fight," she said. "We will not interfere. We shall exit the Red Ravine through our own abilities." Using their Dao heart, elves could easily shoot their arrows towards the other side of the chasm and teleport there using their powers. They didn't need to defeat the mockingjay and obtain the bridge. Meanwhile, Shina kept shooting her arrows, yet none of them hit. And with each miss, the feeling of uselessness kept hammering towards her heart. She has always considered herself as the best secretary, someone that Michael could rely on. She used to feel competent. She used to feel needed. But ever since abilities and divas came into play, she felt as useless as ever. She was supposed to be Michael's guardian, his guard. Yet, every time she was the one who needed his help. She always touted herself as the mature one, someone that her siblings could rely on, someone who could save them in their time of need. But at this critical moment she fell short. She couldn't even save herself. How was she going to be someone Michael could rely on if she couldn't even hit a simple target? Failure after failure, Shina felt more and more alienated from her own body. The bow that used to feel like a third hand to her now felt like something that was actively rejecting her. She couldn't understand it, nor could it understand her body. And all the while, the mockingjay kept hurling insults and taunts her way, perfectly aiming for the weak spots in her mind. That's what it was good at. You're not good enough. You don't deserve that bow. Michael doesn't need you. Nobody does. Shina tried to fight this feeling. She tried to reject the thoughts in her mind by actively trying to prove it wrong. She could become good enough if she just forced herself to train more. She could become more familiar with the bow if she shoots more. And she could become helpful to Michael if she just took more responsibility in the company. She grasped her bow as hard as she could and tightened her grip on the strings. She pulled the arrow back towards her chin and further back. If only she could force the bow to bend to her will, she could overcome this slew of misses and mistakes. Holding the bow at its tightest and aiming carefully at the mockingjay, she tried to concentrate. However, her thoughts began to wander. I have to save my siblings. I have to save Lord Michael. I have to keep the Reborn company organized. I have to get stronger. I have to do this. With all of those thoughts running through her head, an eventual seed of doubt formed in her mind. The tasks burdening her was too daunting for her to complete. She began to wonder if she could even do all of it, if she could even do one. Then, Shina suddenly felt a weakness spread throughout her body. She gritted her teeth and forced the arrow to fly. However, it didn't even leave the bow. The arrow slumped forward, still in its place. "No!" she muttered with a broken voice. She fell on her knees, covering her whole face with her fingers still shivering. She forced herself too much, and now her hands were extremely fatigued. She couldn't even hold her bow anymore. It fell on the ground, landing beside her. All of those thoughts haunted her. It had been building up, and only now, when their only pillar of hope, Lord Michael, disappeared, did she truly feel the weight of the burden on her shoulders. She was deluding herself, thinking that she could become the right-hand woman of the prodigy called Michael Vanderbilt. She thought that she had a chance to catch up to him with the Godforge pieces in her heart. By practicing day and night, holding nothing but her bow and arrows, she thought that she could awaken her diva and prove to everyone and herself that she belonged in her position as Michael's secretary. She was even ridiculing and mocking her siblings for not working hard enough, for not spending all of their time in practice. But training or not, the result was the same. She felt no more stronger than when she received her Godforge piece and when she hadn't. They weren't getting out of this place. Just then, Shina felt a warm hand on her shoulders. She looked up and saw Zion giving her a slap on the back. "Don't worry, sis. I'll grab that mockingjay by the wings and won't let it fly," he said with a reassuring smile. That smile that would have annoyed her any other day was now a silver lining in front of a dark cloud. "No, I'll cut it off," said Jaku, taking out his katana from its sheath. "Let's see if it can still fly away after that." The usually lazy older brother was now taking initiative, leading the charge. He looked dependable. Then, Shina felt a warm hug wrap around her body. She looked to the side and saw Umisu laying her head behind her back. "You don't have to do it all yourself. You can rely on us," Umisu muttered before walking off and joining Jaku and Zion in fighting the Guardian. Shina gazed at her siblings. Zion was punching the air, trying to catch the mockingjay. Jaku turned into pure lightning as he chased the Guardian all over the abyss. And Umisu used her spear to create a powerful gust of air that disturbed the mockingjay's flight path and forced it towards one direction. Emotions welled up in her chest. "You guys!" Zion, who she treated as nothing more than a no-good scoundrel, was now being more dependable than ever. And just like that, Shina felt something inside her click. Umisu was right. She didn't have to carry all of that burden herself. She was so narcissistic to think that only she could be the one to take charge, that only she could save themselves out of this situation. She was treating her siblings as nothing more than dead weight. But in truth, they were more than capable of completing tasks that even she couldn't complete. The mockingjay didn't have to be defeated by a bow and arrow. Jaku was doing well chasing after it using his lightning spells. She was just so focused on the fact that only she could bring them out of this situation that she completely closed herself off from seeing the truth. This was not a one-woman job. This was a collective. She was not the only Rebornian. They were all of them. Even with Lord Michael out of the picture, she wasn't the only one who could keep this nation afloat. There were plenty of talented and gifted individuals capable of stepping up to the task. That's how Michael set it up in the first place. He made it so that everyone had their own responsibility for the nation and its prosperity. She just forgot that. But now, this failure was a brutal reminder. She didn't have to take the burden alone. She couldn't. This was a task for everyone. She slowly stood up, picking up her mithril artifact compound bow as she did. This time, she closed her eyes. She didn't look at Mockingjay's movements. She didn't stress about its random trajectories and flight patterns. She didn't have to. All she had to do was follow her siblings' voices. "Where are you running off to, you little bug?" Zion shouted, with each of his punches creating a sharp cracking sound that echoed throughout the chasm. This sound was like an echolocation, allowing Shina to accurately pinpoint everyone's location even when she had her eyes closed. "You can't run away forever," Jakku coolly whispered as he chased after the Mockingjay. His speed as a literal bolt of lightning severely limited its flight patterns, allowing for Umisu to easily control its pace. "Hiya!" Umisu shouted, whirling her spear around and creating a vortex of air that shot towards the Mockingjay. Jakku chased after the Guardian and led it straight towards the air vortex, letting it fall right into their trap. With tremendous winds shooting at him, the Mockingjay lost control of its wings and was forcefully propelled towards one direction. Forward. This opportunity gave a straight shot for Shina to take. Shina bent down and picked up an arrow she once failed to shoot and loaded it back up to her bow. And as she pulled on the string and aimed for the Mockingjay, she felt something completely different fill her body. She felt cool. She felt relaxed. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to worry about calculating every single factor in hitting towards a target. This time, her siblings did all the work for her. All she had to do was pull the string back and let go. She naturally sat her body upright, her feet shoulder-width apart, and with her shoulders as relaxed as it could be. The bow was no longer shaking. She wasn't gripping on it as hard as she could. She wasn't pulling the string back with the most amount of force possible. She was only holding on to it with just enough force for a solid grip. She was surrendering control. She was letting her own mind, her own instincts do all the work. No longer was she plagued by thoughts of insecurity, of doubts. She wasn't thinking about the past, the present, or the future. Her mind was just a blank slate, a void that only had her target in mind. And unbeknownst to her, the Godforge pieces in her heart started to unfurl. Threads of ability power started to unravel at her heart and start to worm their way through her body and onto her hands, where she had full control of the bow. It was starting to empower her very being, her very soul. By letting go of the pressure of wanting to become stronger, she was able to tap on to a strength that she never even thought she could have. A light green aura started to emanate off her skin. Her bow, connected to her through mind and body, glowed alongside her. Meanwhile, the elves had already reached the other side of the chasm. Their arrows were imbued with ability power thanks to their Dao hearts, and they used it as a gateway teleportation skill to travel from one end of the room to the other, without having to battle the Guardian at all. They took with them the trapped adventurers who asked for help. And when they offered to help the Dragonborns, they were just ignored as they were too busy fighting the Guardian. That white one seemed distressed about not hitting any of her shots. One of the elves commented. "And her bow looks weird. Can one even shoot with that thing?" Another asked curiously. "She shouldn't be disappointed. Those that are not from our lands always have difficulty learning the ways of the arrow," said one of the male elves. The Dragonborns were demi-humans, which meant that they had no Dao heart to increase their power. And without the training and mastery that each elf had to go through in their life, anyone would find it hard to become proficient with the bow enough to defeat a guardian of this caliber. The elves, of course, were secluded by nature, so they were not the type to interfere in other people's business. If the Dragonborns wanted to waste their time trying to defeat the Mockingjay, then they wouldn't say anything else. They simply turned their backs and faced the tunnel doors, about to leave. All they had to do was step forwards and they would leave the Red Ravine for good. But it was at that moment that they felt a gust of wind behind them. They looked back only to see something that shocked them to their core. The female demi-human, who was having trouble even shooting an arrow with her bow, was now standing completely relaxed, with the perfect stance and posture. If it weren't for her white scales, then they would have thought that she was an elf. She's glowing!" exclaimed one of the elves, pointing at the light green glow surrounding Shina. The force they felt from her felt extremely similar to the power they felt from their own Tao hearts. "That's impossible. As a demi-human, she shouldn't have the capacity to command such a power at all." But that wasn't the only thing that Farron noticed. She squinted her eyes and stared at the bow in Shina's hand. When she first glanced at the bow when they arrived, she thought that it was a weird, experimental weapon not meant for fighting. She couldn't understand how it would even be able to perform compared to traditional bows like theirs. And the fact that Shina kept missing her shots only attributed to that impression they had of the compound bow in her hands. But then, as Shina experienced a great burst of ability power, Farron and the elves saw that very same weird bow now glowing with the same power as hers. This could only mean one thing. It was a mithril relic. However, in all of the records, books, and scrolls in the Elven Kingdom, there was no such documentation of such a weird bow. Farron noticed that its quality was extremely good, even compared to the well-preserved mithril relic bows in their arsenal. That would mean that the bow should have at least been recorded in their history books at least once. Shina then pulled at her bowstring with a relaxed grip. "That's not going to be enough," Farron muttered. "This guardian is extremely fast. She'll need to pull her arrow twice as far in order to gather enough speed to hit its target." As experts of the bow, they knew how to properly estimate a bow's power just by looking at it. And in her opinion, Shina's arrow would fall short of the guardian by a large margin. All elves had the same prediction. Just then, finally, Shina let go of the arrow. It shot through the air at incredibly fast speeds, surprising the elves. This wasn't powered from ability power. This was purely physical, brought about by nothing more than the mechanical advantage of the modern compound bow. "What is that bow? It's even stronger than my heavy bow. But it looks so light. See how the bow falls over her hand so easily. How does it shoot an arrow so fast?" The arrow shot through the air and headed straight towards its head, surprising the mockingjay. It buzzed its wings and used its innate ability power to change reality upon its own conditions. It started to control the very memory of the arrow. It would normally follow a curve that perfectly coincided with the mockingjay's current flight path. However, its memory seemed to have been tampered with, letting it forget which way was up and which way was down. It suddenly curved upwards and veered off up towards the ceiling. It seemed as though Shina fell short once again of reaching her goals. It looked like she could not overcome the difference that lie between a normal person versus one that controlled ability power. But when all hope seemed lost, a huge power suddenly burst forth from Shina's body. Above her, a giant egg suddenly manifested. Carved onto its shell was an eye, which had lines spreading all around its surface, as if symbolizing its omniscience. Farron and the elves were speechless as they saw what seemed to be a diva above Shina's head. But that wasn't possible. She was a demi-human. If anything, then her power should come from her Tao heart. Yet the evidence was clear. It was manifested above Shina's head, glowing with a strength unmistakable from that of a magnetic. Suddenly, a thread of ability power shot forth from Shina's god-forge-laden heart and grabbed onto the arrow heading towards the ceiling. The mockingjay's eyes widened as it realized that its very own ability power was getting overpowered. The memory of the arrow was suddenly recovered, allowing it to curve down towards its original target. The guardian. The mockingjay immediately flapped its wings, using its superior speed and aerial maneuverability to dodge out of the arrow's path. Shina's arrow continued downwards, seemingly going towards nothing but the abyss. The guardian, thinking that it had successfully evaded the attack, opened its mouth and cackled as a way to taunt Shina's continued miss. But the next second later, it suddenly felt a stinging pain in its body. It looked down and saw a gaping hole in its torso, which seemed to have come out of nowhere. "Look!" said one of the elves, pointing towards the abyss. Shina's arrow was stuck in place, piercing through what seemed to be a mirage image of the Mockingjay. "Whoa! You hit him!" cheered Zion. "How'd you do that, sis?" Shina looked at the mirage image of the Mockingjay. This was her ability power. She had used it subconsciously without even thinking about it. She knew that the Mockingjay would try to dodge out of the arrow's way. But in her heart of hearts, she knew that she should only think of nothing but her target. She shouldn't think about where it would go next or how the wind would affect it. She only had to hit her target as if it was completely still, with time no longer moving. And it worked. Somehow, even though the Mockingjay moved out of the way, there was a mirage image of its body that was left behind for her arrow to hit. As soon as it pierced through that mirage, then the damage would immediately be transferred over to the original target, no matter where or how far it was. This was her new power. As long as she could see her target at the moment of releasing her shot, then it didn't matter how fast they were. They would still be hit. The Mockingjay screamed, feeling the piercing pain in its torso. It had never experienced this feeling before. It felt like the speed that it was so prideful of was useless. Suddenly, its body started to shake. A red glow emanated off of the hole in its chest, releasing the ability power in its body. "It's over," Farron muttered. With the Mockingjay leaking out the only source of its life, it would only be a couple more seconds left before it completely died off. But just then, the whole room started to shake. "What's happening?" Zion asked out loud. However, not even the most experienced adventurers could explain this phenomenon. Something was happening, and it seemed that everything was emanating from the deep, dark abyss over the cliffside. A rumble echoed from underneath. Then multiple bodies emerged from the dark, each one as dark as the abyss where they came from. The elves were shocked beyond belief once they saw this. "No! This isn't possible. How are they here?" Farron looked at these dark creatures with concern written all over her face. She was just as surprised as the rest of the elves. They didn't think they'd be dealing with them here. She immediately shouted towards the Dragonborn, warning them of these creatures. "These are Zephyrs," she shouted. Zephyrs looked like they were made out of a gaseous shadow, whose body greatly resembled that of an elf with wings. They were made out of pure darkness, mirroring that of their evil and malicious nature. "They should only be native to the elven kingdom," Farron muttered. "How are they here?" They were almost halfway around the world away from the elven kingdom. It didn't make sense that a few Zephyrs were able to cross that much distance without anyone noticing. This was impossible, unless there was a great rift in space that created a portal which allowed these Zephyrs to travel over here. Either way, Zephyrs were an elf's greatest nightmare. They seemed to be creatures made by the gods to counter that of the elven race. They were almost impossible to detect, even with an elf's natural perception skills. Not only that, but their flight patterns were completely counterintuitive to the elves. Zephyrs seemed to know everything about the elves' training and the way they shoot with their bows. Only elves with the right talent and training could deal with these creatures. Unfortunately, there was none in Farron's group. It was usually accustomed to have at least one elf know about the ways to defeat a Zephyr in a group, but since Farron and the others knew that they would never encounter a Zephyr outside of their native lands, they thought it would be okay. But they thought wrong. They would have never thought that there would be a spatial anomaly right where they currently were. "We have to leave now," Farron said to the Dragonborns. Thankfully, once the Mockingjay was defeated, a platform made out of pebbles appeared in the middle, allowing Shina and her siblings to cross. However, Farron was completely flabbergasted to see that they had no intention of leaving. Shina retrieved another arrow from her quiver and loaded it to her bow. She was attempting to defeat the Zephyrs. "You can't." And before Farron could continue her warning, Shina let her arrow fly towards the Zephyr closest to her. The dark, shadowy creature with wings and an elf's elongated ears suddenly disappeared from its original place. And suddenly, two more Zephyrs appeared a few meters away from where it left. This was the most dangerous thing about a Zephyr. Whenever someone shoots and misses it, it will always duplicate itself. That was why Farron wanted everyone to leave. The best way of dealing with a Zephyr was to not deal with it at all. But just then, Shina's egg diva burst forth with ability power, shaking as it did so. A mirage image of the Zephyr appeared back where it left, and not even a moment later, the arrow directly hit its chest. The two Zephyrs suddenly clutched their chests, feeling an immense amount of pain in their bodies. Then, they burst into a cloud of dark smoke. She did it! She killed a Zephyr! Farron and the other elves were simply awed at how easily Shina killed a Zephyr. If the elves back in their homeland knew about this, then they would definitely be extremely shocked as well. Zephyrs were such a problem that there were practically bounties always in place. Shina's egg diva wiggled in happiness as it defeated its first Zephyr. But it didn't end there. Shina loaded up another arrow in her bow and targeted another Zephyr. Shina shot her arrow, with the targeted Zephyr once again easily dodging out of the arrow's path and duplicating itself a couple of meters away. But once again, a mirage image appeared where it left, letting the arrow hit its original target regardless of where it went off to. It exploded into a dust of black smoke, eliminating another Zephyr. Shina continued to load up arrow after arrow, releasing it in quick succession. She didn't even wait until her arrow hit its target. She knew it would, so there was no need to waste any more time. In just a couple of seconds, 6 Zephyrs were killed. The elves were speechless. When they first saw Shina, they saw her struggling to even keep her bow steady. They thought she was just a beginner. But now, she was killing one of the most troublesome enemies that their entire race had to deal with in such ease that they were starting to even wonder if it was even that hard to begin with. But no, Shina was just that talented in archery. Just as Shina finished another Zephyr, she heard a faint cracking sound echoing from everywhere. She looked around the room, wondering if there was another surprise coming. Crack! But then she noticed that the sound wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from the inside. She was hearing the sound directly in her head. She looked up, seeing her diva egg wiggling and shaking. And then she saw it. A crack on top of the egg. Is it hatching? She asked herself. She quickly loaded up another arrow into her bow, hitting and killing another Zephyr like clockwork. Then, she looked up and saw her diva egg jumping up, causing the crack to develop further downwards. With each confirmed kill, her egg seemed to get happier and happier, becoming more and more lively until it couldn't contain itself and got cracked in the process. Something inside her egg was dying to get out. It seemed that this was not the full extent of her diva. But from what she knew about divas according to what Michael told her, this was supposed to be impossible. A diva could manifest itself in parts until you advance through the stages. But it couldn't change its shape or form. Whatever form it took, that was permanent. But this was not the time for her to ask questions. She still had tens of Zephyrs to defeat. The more she defeated these creatures, the more her egg diva would continue its hatching process. By the end of it, she could even break its shell entirely. She continued to load arrow after arrow, defeating Zephyrs left and right. There were only 5 Zephyrs left in total. But just as Shina was about to shoot her arrow, the Zephyrs suddenly started vibrating at the same time. They buzzed, with their forms starting to get blurrier and blurrier by the second. Curses! Now we really have to leave. How unlucky are we? The Zephyrs started to move closer towards each other, merging into one being. Destroy it now before it completes its transformation, or else it's going to explode, Farron warned. The elves were starting to panic. One of the reasons why Zephyrs were so troublesome was because they had this ability to combine with each other and unleash a terrifying explosion. They were thankful it's just 5 Zephyrs left remaining, or else they could destroy a whole chunk off the face of the earth. But still, this could be enough to level the whole red ravine. Shina quickly loaded up another arrow into her bow and was about to release it, when all of a sudden, snap, the string on her bows splintered into hairs. Before she awakened her diva, she had been pushing her bow past her limits trying to control her aim. Unbeknownst to her, it had been slowly deteriorating its strings. The frame of her compound bow might be made out of mithril, but its string was made out of ordinary material. With her weapon broken, Shina couldn't kill the last remaining Zephyrs before it completed its combination. The enlarged, blurry figure of the combined 5 Zephyrs started to pulsate and blink. It was already too late. The self-destruction can't be stopped now. All that was left for them to do was to run away fast enough before it demolished the entire Red Ravine. Run! Farron made a last warning to the Dragonborns. They would leave now with or without them. But Shina stood her ground. She looked up at the wiggling egg diva above her head. Somehow, even though no words were spoken, they were communicating. Shina felt some kind of pride well up in her chest. A kind of pride that wasn't going to back down against the likes of these Zephyrs. According to the elves, once these combined Zephyrs reached this stage, an explosion was inevitable. But the egg was telling her differently. It wants to fight. It refused to accept defeat. All right, if you want to fight, then I'll fight. As soon as she made that decision, the egg suddenly glowed with a green power. Crack! A small piece popped out of its shell, allowing the golden light to leak outwards. Then, as the egg diva continued to shake and wiggle, more and more cracks propagated through its shell. Pieces started to fall out before eventually, what was left of her diva now became a blinding gold light. Then the light exploded. Krya. Shina felt a high-pitched roar inside her mind. She looked up, only to see the true form of her diva. It was a winged creature, one with scales as white as her own. It had a sleek tail, one as smooth and as thin as a snake's. Its torso was connected to 4 limbs, each one being used as a leg to prop itself up. Its neck was long, showing bigger scales that were shaped in an upside-down triangle. And if its body was not enough to identify this creature, then its head certainly would. This was a white dragon, a majestic and tyrannical creature of the skies still at its infancy. Its horns were long and located where its ears would be, which bore a resemblance to the elves' long-tipped ears. Above its 2 eyes was another symbol for an eye, made out of small golden scales. As soon as the elves saw the dragon above Shina's head, they couldn't believe it. Why would one of the strongest creatures of the world be her diva? It didn't make sense. She wasn't a draconian. She wasn't part of their race. But before they could question it any further, Farron suddenly felt something stir in her pockets. She looked down, only to see the darkwood she obtained starting to wiggle out of her possession. She watched as the piece of entangled darkwood suddenly shoot out of her pockets and crossed the abyss in a mere instant. It shot towards Shina's bow and wrapped itself in its frame, becoming its string. She had completed the bow. Farron couldn't believe it. The darkwood chose her. It chose her to be its wielder. Farron always wondered what kind of species Shina and the rest of them were. She always thought they were just some kind of lizards, with a lot of other animal mixtures seeping into their very natures. It was quite natural to see a variety of demi-human species, especially since their very bloodlines weren't being controlled by the Supreme Being. But the diva above Shina's head was unmistakably a dragon, and a mighty one at that. Even though it still looked like it was still in its infancy, just its uniqueness and its multi-layered scales foretold its eventual maturity into one standing level with the best of the draconic race. Yet, that still didn't explain how or why they had this ability, why they could manifest a diva like that of a human. "Lady Farron, we must go," warned one of the elves. Farron was so consumed with her questions and her curiosity that she completely forgot about the current problem facing her. The Zephyr's self-destruction was nearing its peak, with its blinking having an interval of less than a second. It won't be long until it explodes and she and the rest of the other elves won't be able to escape out of it. Just then, Farron saw something in the corner of her eye. The white dragon above Shina's head opened its mouth and roared mutely, as if it was just awakening from its nap. Then, the tip of her arrow started to glow with a green light. The darkwood entwined into her bow was glowing as well, mimicking the power and aura coming out of the white dragon, as if it had fully integrated into Shina as part of herself. Shina looked down at her new string. It was sturdy yet incredibly flexible. She realized that she had been missing out this entire time. It felt like she was just now truly opening her eyes to what a true string should be like. The string that she used back then now looked inflexible and prone to snapping like a strand of hair. In comparison, the darkwood in her hands was like it was as durable as mithril, yet as flexible as rubber. It was the perfect combination to be an archer's string. She didn't even have to put in much pressure to achieve the same result as before. She felt like she could shoot through 10 layers of steel just from a simple pulling of the darkwood string. She could only wonder the limits that this weapon could take her if she used her full strength. But for the Zephyr in front of her, power was not the issue. It was suppression, and she instinctively knew how to deal with these Zephyrs. She released her grip on the darkwood string, letting the arrow fly through the air, leaving behind a glowing green light like a comet's tail. It reached the combined Zephyr's chest, and immediately, the Zephyr's body started to lose its density and become as weightless as a cloud, causing any projectile to simply pass through its body. But Shina's arrow was no ordinary one. The green light on the tip emanated an even greater light, encompassing the entirety of the dark, gaseous body of the self-destructing Zephyr. Suddenly, the mirage images of the 5 individual Zephyrs appeared in the air, all lined up in a single file. Shina's arrow pushed through the cloud, piercing through the first Zephyr, then to the other, and to the other, all the way to the last Zephyr, killing every single last one of them in one shot. Just as the Zephyr's self-destruction reached its final phase, with its body pulsating and blinking with almost no interval left, its body suddenly poofed into a harmless black dust that quickly dissipated in the air. Farron and the other elves had already ducked down, holding themselves for dear life. But when the seconds passed, and the inevitable explosion didn't come, they all looked up and realized that the Zephyr was gone. It had been defeated by an arrow glowing with a green light. Now that it had done its job, it quickly lost all power and arced down into the abyss. Farron looked over to the cliff on the other side and saw Shina standing with her bow still in her hands, and with her white dragon diva showing off a proud smile. They did it. They did the impossible. She defeated a Zephyr's explosive phase. No elf has ever had the honor of doing that, Farron muttered. But then again, that was not the only feat that this female demihuman had done that no elf ever has. And that was being chosen personally by Darkwood. She needed a string, and Darkwood answered her calls. Amazing, sis. I knew you could do it, Zion cheered. If you hadn't, then I would have just punched it until it went away. I'm just glad it's over. Can we go home now? Jaku asked, yawning. Yay! Diva, Omisu muttered, excitedly going on her toes and petting the white dragon. Even though she couldn't touch it, the white dragon diva still rubbed its head on her hand. I know. I never thought I'd be able to do it, Shina said, looking up at her diva. Now she understood the power that was hidden inside her body. The white dragon looked down at her and nodded, as if it was saying, "Thank you for trusting me." Then it disappeared. Just then, Shina turned around and was face to face with Farron and the other elves. They had quickly gone over to this side of the cliff. With the Zephyrs done and dusted, there was no more danger left to be had, leaving for a lot of room for discussions that needed to happen. I am called Lady Farron. May we have the honor of knowing your name? Shina performed a little curtsy before introducing herself. My name is Shina. Shina, Farron muttered, as if memorizing her name. Then, she pointed over to the darkwood in Shina's bow. Do you know what that is? She asked. Shina looked at her bow. No, I don't. I don't even know where it came from. With the self-destructing Zephyr threatening to blow up the whole red ravine, Shina had no time to question how she got a new string. Everything was a blur to her. That is called a darkwood, and it is a piece of nature that we elves deeply treasure. Our ancestors used them as the strings for their bows, just as you have now. We still have darkwood in our possessions, but it is very limited. Shina immediately understood what happened. This is your possession, she realized. I apologize for taking it. She grasped the darkwood in her hands. She knew that the right thing was to return it to its rightful owner, but after having it in her hands, she felt inseparable to it. Doing so would feel like giving up her own arm. Farron saw the look on her face and chuckled. Do not worry. I am not planning to take what is rightfully yours, she said. The darkwood chose you. It wouldn't leave your side even if you gave it away. Shina straightened up her posture, feeling gratitude and immense happiness after hearing those words. The reason why I explained the darkwood to you is because I want you to understand how important you are to the elven race. Not only have you shown incredible skill and talent, defeating Zephyrs by yourself and even killing it while it is in its self-destructive phase, but you have also shown that you are the chosen one. You are the only one that has earned the respect of the darkwood. Then, Farron and the other elves kneeled down, showing deference to Shina. Lady Shina, we beg of you to please teach us your ways. Show us how you have captured the attention of the darkwood, for it is our life's mission to do so. Please, you are the only ones that could elevate the elven kingdom back to glory. Become one of us. It was a custom in the elven culture to kiss the ground whenever asking someone for a favor. It was a way of showing their respect for the person, as well as the respect they had for nature and everything else. You will become an honorary member of the elven race, one of the elves shouted. Trust that you will receive compensation and respect that deserves someone your caliber, another elf added. We are prepared to give you anything you want. Whoa, sis, you're a big shot, Zion teased, poking at her sides, which quickly earned him a swift elbow in the stomach. That certainly shut him up. Shina then faced the elves, fixing her clothes and exhibiting that same upright posture she had whenever she was acting on behalf of the Reborn company as Michael's secretary. I am extremely honored for that offer, Shina said, bowing. However, I do not want to spend any time away from the nation of Reborn and its grandiose goals. I am not the chosen one that you call me. I am and always will be Lord Michael's secretary. The elves looked at Shina with confusion. First of all, they didn't know anyone named Michael. And second of all, they were surprised that Shina didn't even consider the offer for even a moment. Becoming an honorary member of the elven race entailed access to the best training facilities and best training scrolls about archery that could be offered in this world. This was every ranger's dream. No one had ever been offered this choice before, yet Shina was so quick to dismiss it. You say that you are a secretary, but for someone of your caliber, becoming an owner or a CEO is the least that they could offer you, said one of the elves. Are you under a contract? Another elf asked. The elven kingdom is willing to buy out your contract and give you your freedom as you so desire. Shina quickly shook her head and raised her hand, signaling for them to stop. It was still understandable that they had this opinion because they didn't know anything about the Reborn company, but she was starting to get offended by the fact that they were treating the Reborn company as if it was some evil entity keeping her from escaping. Not only that, but they didn't seem to think much about her job as a secretary. She was proud of being one, and wouldn't choose any other profession given the choice. This was the most helpful job that she could do for Lord Michael. You seem to be misunderstanding something, she said to the elves. The nation of Reborn is my home. Leaving it would be like leaving my family. It is simply unfeasible. And you seem to think that I have achieved all of this on my own. But that is wrong. I owe everything in my life to Lord Michael, she declared. Farron and the other elves were speechless. The loyalty and devotion Shina had for this Lord Michael was something to behold. They were starting to wonder what kind of man he was, for her to be so pious. Who is Michael? Farron asked. Meanwhile, back in the Goth castle, Michael sat on the ground, his legs crossed and his arms planted at his thighs. He was meditating, trying to recover as much ability power to his God-forged piece as much as he could. It had only been a few hours since then and only gained about 5% charge to his battery. 25% more charge, he thought to himself. I just need to meditate. According to Harbinger, one of the best ways to recover ability power was to think about his own power. He needed to find the meanings behind the name, Harbinger of the Future. He thought a lot about it in these past few hours, but nothing he thought helped in any way, shape, or form with accruing enough ability power for a quantum step. Of course, it was hard to contemplate about power without actually being in a fight, but it certainly didn't help the fact that Fudge and Kuno were always just whispering to themselves, giggling every few seconds and distracting him from ever forming a complex thought. You're so funny, Fudge. Kuno giggled. Fudge tilted his head. Funny? That was cool. Not funny. Being a ninja is all about having style and being cool. I call it cool farming. Michael sighed, giving up on meditating. It's no use. I'm just going to wait a week to replenish my ability power. But it was just in that moment that he suddenly saw a notification pop up in front of his eyes. Congratulations, Michael. Shina has successfully awakened her diva, transferring excess ability power to your Godforge pieces. Learning that Shina had just activated her first ability power was already a pleasant surprise. But remembering that he would get the excess energy from her breakthrough was an even more pleasant shock. Suddenly, he felt a large surge of power enter his Godforge pieces, making his heart as warm as boiling water. He quickly attached his battery to his chest, allowing all that energy to be siphoned off safely into a secure spot. 10%, 15%, 20%. He remembered that when Fudge awakened his powers, some of his excess energy was transferred over to him. And this was also what allowed him to use Quantum Step when facing the purest vampires. It wasn't long before the charge reached up to a whopping 28%. Although this wasn't enough for a single charge of Quantum Step, he could simply use his own ability power to make up for the rest. Fudge, Kuno. Hop in, he said to them. He quickly deployed his drone to his hands. Then, while Kuno was hugging Fudge in her chest, he grabbed her hands and touched the miniature door on the drone's frame. Suddenly, all three of them were transferred over to the drone's subspace, surprising Kuno. And before she could ask any questions, he quickly piloted the drone. He was planning to escape now and use the drone to execute his Quantum Step. He had already attached the battery onto the drone, meaning that it already had the necessary amount of energy to pull it off. All he had to do was pilot it. Piloting the drone was essentially the same as putting his own soul into it, meaning he could use spells and techniques that he could normally do with his own body. And of course, this was the same for abilities. It was theoretically fine, but he hadn't tested it out yet to know if it works. Now was as good a time as any to try. Master, can I borrow this thing some other time? It's so cool that you can see everything from inside, Fudge said, as he jumped from wall to wall looking at the displays showcasing the outside world. Nope, Michael quickly replied. Aside from the fact that it was a bad idea, it was also unfeasible. No one could control this drone aside from him. Fudge can have his own private pocket dimension in his mini drone cape as long as you purchase the inhabitation upgrade in the store, ChatJK5 reminded him. Without further ado, Michael piloted the drone to move closer to the black walls of the Gothic castle. His plan was simple. First, use the Quantum Step to bypass the thick castle walls lined with ability power way too strong for him to break through. Then, once he was out, he would use the phase-through ability of the drone to navigate through the underground rock that surrounded castle walls. Here goes. Quantum Step. He visualized gathering enormous amounts of ability power in his hands, and suddenly, threads began to unravel out of the batteries at the bottom of the drone's frame and slowly flowed towards the front two propellers. The very fabric of space began bending, folding in upon itself as the propellers gained more and more ability power. It was working. It wasn't long before the technique reached its apex. And to push it to its final phase, Michael tapped into his own Godforge pieces and added the last bit of ability power needed to execute the Quantum Step. Suddenly, the drone folded into itself, disappearing into a singularity in an instant. Then, it reappeared on the other side of the wall, completely bypassing the defensive perimeter that only those above the nascent spirit realm could break. Immediately, Michael, Fudge, and Kuno saw nothing but darkness around the drone. They were smack dab in the middle of a stony layer hundreds of feet underground. Thankfully, Michael anticipated that this would happen, so he had immediately activated the drone's new ability. Its individual atoms began expanding, becoming less and less dense, allowing it to pass through solid objects without a problem. They were finally out. Finally, Michael heaved a sigh of relief. Once he was outside the Gothic castle, he could finally feel connected to the mana in his surroundings. He could finally connect to the magic he left behind in the nation of Reborn, in Angora City, in Metropolis, and in the Red Ravine. Felt like he could finally breathe again. Let's get out of here, he said before activating his shadow teleportation skill. Extremely large amounts of mana began gathering towards the drone in order to have enough mana to complete the spell. Whoa, that's a lot, he realized. Where did we end up? Even after a few seconds of the drone gobbling up all the mana in its surrounding, it still wasn't enough to complete the teleportation. There was so much mana being consumed that the ground itself was starting to shake equivalent to that of a magnitude 8 earthquake. He was starting to worry whether he should even continue the skill. Such a large disturbance in the natural mana in the environment would definitely create some problems. Thankfully, though, there weren't any life forms anywhere near them, or else they could have probably gotten negatively affected by the spell. Finally, a shadow began to envelop the whole drone, creating a bubble that covered everything in darkness. Then, a few seconds later, the shadow subsided back into the ground. As soon as it did, they found themselves in a completely different environment, one that didn't surround them in hundreds of feet of solid rock. The drone was currently hovering above a cliff, leading up to a dark abyss. And on the cliff he saw the Dragonborns. He was relieved. He had teleported directly to the clone he left in their shadows to make sure that they were okay. And judging from the carefree expression of Zion and the constant yawning of Jakku, then it was safe to say that they weren't in real trouble. He got out of the drone and slowly floated down towards the cliff. And as he did so, he was surprised to see that they were talking to elves. He had never seen an elf before, but those long-tipped ears, leafy clothes, and tall and lanky bodies couldn't be mistaken for any other race. "Who is Michael?" asked one of the middle-aged female elves talking to Shina. Shina looked really excited that she was given the opportunity to gush about their Lord Michael. "Lord Michael is..." And just as she was about to continue her sentence, she suddenly whipped her head upwards and finally noticed the man floating down towards them. A look of relief, happiness, and tons of other emotions welled up in her face. "Lord Michael," she said, immediately kneeling down. The other Dragonborns finally noticed him as well and greeted him in their own ways. "Bro Mike, where'd you been?" Zion said, casually waving at Michael as if he'd just only come back from vacation. "Boss sup?" Jakku said, nodding. "Boss Michael. Happy hee?" Omisu muttered shyly, with her cheeks blushing. Finally, the elves took notice of the golden-haired boy coming down towards them. "Michael," Farron said, getting a good look at him. And immediately, she was surprised at his youth. She expected the Lord Michael that Shina had been loyal to be some kind of powerful human, the likes of Alaric or the other legacies in Metropolis. But it looked like he was just some ordinary kid. "Hey guys, glad you're all right," he said, landing on the ground softly. Shina was about to approach him, but Zion got there first. "You gotta listen, bro Mike. We went through this weird space tunnel and then... Zion began to narrate their troubles in the space rift, and how Shina was the one who saved them from getting lost in the chaos forever. They were caught in the aftermath of my abduction. But it's good that they got out. And of course, Zion also told Michael about the Mockingjay, Shina's troubles with the bow, and the appearance of the creatures called Zephyrs. Sis probably didn't wash her eyes this morning. That's why she couldn't hit anything. But in the end, she was able to do it. And get this, she awakened her diva. Shina immediately smacked him on the head. "Hey, I wanted to tell him that." "Zephyrs? What's that?" Zephyrs are the natural adversaries of the elves. They reside in the deep forests of the elven kingdom and... ChatJK5 gave him a brief description of Zephyrs. "They're native to the elven kingdom? I see. They also got caught up in the space rift and somehow ended up here. Wait, was the Gothic castle located in the elven kingdom? If the Zephyrs were caught up in the space rift because of his transportation to the Gothic castle, then it was safe to assume that it had to be located somewhere near where the Zephyrs lived. And according to the elves, they only lived in the elven kingdom. It would also explain why his shadow teleportation skill required an enormous amount of mana. He had to travel through to another continent. If that is true, then this is good if I ever want to visit the elven kingdom. Now that I've been there once, I can always go back. It would just take an enormous amount of mana to do so. It is incredibly fortunate and unfortunate that the Zephyrs appeared here out of all places, Farron said. I haven't introduced myself. I am Lady Farron, and we of the elven race greet you, Michael of the humans. The elves put their right hand on their chests and bowed. Fortunate? He asked. Why do you say that? We do not know how these Zephyrs appeared here, but we do know why. Mother Nature herself sent those Zephyrs to let us know and discover a generational talent none of us had yet seen in our lifetimes. The venerable Shina. Farron and the elves showed great honor and admiration as they looked at Shina. I feel like I'm missing something here, he muttered. Shina? Care to explain? Shina bowed and told him of the fight that happened between the Zephyrs. She told about how she awakened her ability power and killed the Zephyrs one by one. That's amazing, Shina, he complimented her. I knew that you'd break through when you needed it. Ahem. It's nothing special, Master, Shina said, trying to resist smiling from ear to ear. It is special, Farron insisted. She is not of the elven race, yet she can kill Zephyrs even better than our own. Without her, this whole red ravine would just become a crater on the ground. We truly believe that she has a fate that is deeply tied to the elves. That is why we beseeched for her to accompany us back to the elven kingdom and become one of us. Shina immediately assured Michael of her loyalty. I refused, Master. There is no treasure in the world that can make me turn my back on the one who gave me everything. Then, she showed the compound bow mithril artifact to the elves. You see this? Farron and the elves finally got a good look at the compound bow. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It had bending mechanisms that could turn even the simplest of draws into a powerful yet precise shot that would defeat even the best bows made in the ancient era. Yes, this bow is clearly an unknown mithril relic forged during the ancient times. It had hid itself in history, only for it to be discovered by the Chosen One. This bow was also one of the reasons why they wanted Shina to be a part of the Elven Kingdom. They wanted to treat it as a priceless treasure, a heroic weapon befitting only to the archer chosen by the darkwood. Shina could undoubtedly become one of the greatest archers in the entire world. It was only natural that she would side with the elves. Saying that this bow was an ancient treasure that I found would be an insult to Michael and the hard-working dwarves who forged this with their blood, sweat, and tears, Shina said to the elves. Farron tilted her head. What? I did not find this in a treasure box, nor did it find me. This was forged especially for me as a benefit of being one of Lord Michael's closest aides, Shina clarified. And as soon as the elves heard this, they immediately went into an uproar of questions. Especially made? I'm sorry, I do not understand. Dwarves? A genuine mithril artifact? Forged? Farron stared at the compound bow. It had no rust, no cracks, and no broken pieces, unlike most, if not all, of the mithril relics found preserved from the ancient era. She thought that this bow was the same. But now, Shina was saying that it was her Lord Michael who personally forged this weapon for her. She was telling her that the golden-haired boy in front of her was the one who forged such a treasure? It was so absurd she thought it was a joke. Not only was it a genuine mithril artifact, one with the same power and durability as the ones in the ancient era, but it was also a weapon that was precisely forged to create even more leverage than some of the best bows in existence. That can't be possible, Farron chuckled. The techniques to create a mithril artifact have been lost in time. Even the mighty dwarven race has forgotten this speciality. If it's not possible, then what about this? Zion asked, taking out his gauntlets. See, as is mine, Jaka said, unsheathing his katana for a little bit to let them see the black blade forged out of mithril. Me too, Umisu shyly muttered, holding her spear close to her chest. Farron and the elves had their jaws on the ground. The silent but ever-present power hidden on those weapons were unmistakable. They were all mithril artifacts. Lord Michael has given everything to us Dragonborns, Shina said. He has given us a weapon, a talent, a purpose, and most importantly, he has given us a home. I will never become anything other than a Rebornian. Farron and the elves were completely speechless. They thought they could persuade Shina if they just offered her benefits to the elven kingdom. But clearly, she didn't need any of it. Heck, if Farron was in the same position, she would also do the same. They could create mithril artifacts, for nature's sake. This now begs the question. Who is Michael? Farron stared at the golden-haired boy and found nothing special about him. He looked like an ordinary human. You can make mithril artifacts? She asked him. You made that bow? Yup, he replied. And that is called a compound bow. But I didn't make that string. By the way, what is that? While talking about Shina's bow, he finally noticed the presence of her new string. It looked like it was made out of dried intertwined vines. When constructing her bow, he just used a normal string that a compound bow would use. He always knew that it wouldn't be up to par compared to the frame, but he had no other choice but to use it since he had no better alternative. That is darkwood, Farron explained. It was the string that the ancient elves used for their bows. It is as durable as mithril, but as flexible as rubber. It is the best material that any ranger could dream of. Shina demonstrated this by firing off quick shots without any arrows. And with each shot, a sharp whipping sound echoed out of the bow, showing its immense power. Upon close inspection, it seems that this darkwood material has elasticity that defies common physics. It has an efficiency that exceeds that of 100%. The force produced by the material exceeds that of the force put inside of it. With stats like that, Michael considered darkwood to be in the same league as mithril. It was the perfect addition to any mithril artifact or weapon that would need any kind of elasticity that a normal mithril couldn't offer. The best example for this was the bow, whose entire power comes straight from its string. Even a compound bow made out of mithril would be useless if it had a broken string. It didn't even have to be for weapons, he realized. There are some musicians back in our nation that need better strings for their mithril equipment. I wonder, if they used darkwood for it, would their powers increase as well? His imagination went wild once again as he thought of such grand possibilities. But then, he remembered that darkwood was in the same league as mithril, which meant that it was probably incredibly rare, maybe even close to extinction like mithril. This darkwood is amazing. But you guys don't use it, he said to Farron, noticing that their bows used normal strings. Darkwood is precious. We can only grow under very specific conditions. It has to have the right amount of light, wind, soil, water, mana, and many more. Even though it only needs a month for it to grow from seedling to maturity, any slight error in its conditions would immediately result in its death. Our success rate in cultivating darkwood is close to 0. That is why we have all resorted to journeying outside of the elven kingdom in search for any darkwood relics left behind from the ancient times. And the royal continent is the best place to look for it. I was supposed to use the darkwood for my bow, but it has chosen Shina to be its wielder. It chose to become her weapon, and I am more than willing to step away. Zion then told Michael about what happened in detail, with the darkwood flying across the abyss while the combined Zephyr was close to self-destruction. It flew towards her? That sounds familiar. The elves explained the phenomenon by saying that Mother Nature herself has chosen Shina. But from his perspective, the more plausible explanation would be that the darkwood flew towards her because she was a natural magnetic. It was the same thing as when Godforge pieces got attracted towards his heart. He guessed that the only basis for someone to become a natural magnetic was if they wielded unity, just like the ancient humans had. And since anyone he awakened would immediately wield 8 elements like him, then that meant that once they had Godforge pieces in their hearts, then they would also become a natural magnetic. This seemed to prove that. It seems that thanks are in order, he said to Farron. If darkwood is that valuable, then I appreciate you for letting Shina have it. Farron immediately shook her head. No, it is my honor to have witnessed such a once-in-a-lifetime event. Michael then bent down into his shadows and picked up a thoughtful gift he thought she'd like. Here as thanks, he said as he tossed it in her direction. No, I do not need compensation. But before Farron could even finish her sentence, she felt her own heart surge with excitement. She looked down, only to see a mithril artifact compound bow in her hands. Wah! This was real mithril. Touching it with her own hands, she realized that its power was completely different from any weapon she had ever wielded before. Her ability power was surging much faster than it normally would using her own bow. Felt clear. It was the same difference between a single flowing drop of water compared to a raging river. It was light, yet she could feel the beast hidden within this weapon. "You're giving this to me?" Farron asked, still doubting the whole situation. "I think this is a fair trade for a darkwood," Michael said to her. But from her perspective, this wasn't a fair trade at all. He was losing far too much. This was a full mithril artifact already sculpted and forged to become a weapon. And not just any weapon, but a compound bow. There was only one other compound bow in the entire world. "We have plenty more in store. Don't worry," Michael assured her. Farron was about to object, but then she realized that he wasn't playing it down in any way. He really could make his own mithril artifacts, and his nonchalance in giving one away for free was proof of that. This is an immense treasure that you have given me," Farron said, her hands going across the bow's frame. Then, she and the other elves kneeled down onto the ground and kissed the soil, giving thanks to both Michael and nature itself for this gift. "Trust that this weapon will be put to good use," she said. "This will be an excellent weapon for Lyra." "Lady Farron, that is a good idea," said one of the elves. "She deserves a superb bow like this after all she's been through. I can't wait to see the look on that girl's face when she sees this." The elves were really excited to receive the compound bow, treating it as a national treasure of some kind. Michael didn't have the heart to tell them that all archers in the nation of Reborn had the same compound bow. "Thank you, Michael of the humans. We will never forget this favor," they all declared. "I know it's not much, but I would like to give you a small token of our appreciation," Farron said, giving Michael a small bag. As soon as he heard that satisfying clacking sound from the bag, he already knew what it was. Those were sand dollars. He quickly opened the bag and counted it to be 20,000 sand dollars. "Thanks," he said. Farron nodded. "For now, we must go and seek out more darkwood hidden in ruins, but we will be in Metropolis after a month for the parade. If you would like to ask for our help, then all you need is ask and we shall offer up our bows at the ready." Shina then stepped forward. "If you'd really like to help Lord Michael, then you can visit our store in Metropolis and check out our goods." "Then we shall do so." The elves then took out an arrow from their quiver and offered them on the ground. This was a custom in elven culture as a way of saying good luck. Giving someone your own arrows symbolizes your desire for them to be safe, even at the cost of their own safety. After that, they left the cave, leaving Michael and the Dragonborns alone. "Lord Michael," Shina said, approaching him, "now that I have awakened my ability, will I also be given the same mini drone the same as Fudge?" She manifested her diva, showing the white dragon above her head. The cute little draconic diva purred cutely as it saw Michael. "A white dragon," Michael muttered. "You should name her Artie." As soon as he said that, the white dragon perked up and spread its wings in pride. "Seemed to like the name." "Artie," Shina muttered. "That fits." Since Shina's talent was the SS-class all-seeing artillery, then it was only appropriate to give it a name related to it. "Once we get home, I'll give you the mini-drone," he said. It would be a good idea to purchase the mini-drone link for Shina so that her weapon could be upgraded in the future. And thankfully, with 20,000 more sand dollars in his inventory, he had more than enough to purchase another mini-drone for Shina to use. "Great!" Shina cheered. "Ah, I wanted one too," Zion complained. "Where's your diva?" "I don't see it," Shina said, teasing him. The two once again bickered non-stop. Just then, they heard the sound of the tunnel starting to open up. A couple of seconds later, they saw a violet slime pop out of the rift, with a stone knight by his side. "Yahoo! I'm back!" Fudge exclaimed. "Where'd you been?" Michael asked. Somehow, Fudge slipped away when he wasn't paying attention. He thought he'd be able to keep the little guy from creating chaos by having him trapped inside the drone's pocket dimension. But it seemed that it was useless. "I was trying to find Grieve 2.0, Fudge said as the stone knight picked up Fudge and put him on top of its head. But look at what I found, master. Fudge then used his shadow and revealed 4 boxes that looked like they were made out of stainless steel. Michael's eyes widened in recognition. Is that? Yep, master. I found them while I was going around the Red Ravine rooms, searching for 2.0. He picked up one of the boxes and twisted its top. Upon doing so, it's folded up and revealed the flaming object inside. It was a Godforge piece. He picked up another box and checked its contents. And it was indeed another piece of a floating liquid surrounded by white flames. Somehow, Fudge got 4 different boxes filled with Godforge pieces. Opening up all the boxes, ChatJK5 estimated the total to be about 10 kilograms in total. And with the 5 kilograms he found back in the first room they went through, then he would have 15 kilograms in total. That would definitely be enough for him to finally transcend to the 5th stage of body formation. Where did you find all of this? He asked Fudge. Hee. Are you proud of me, master? There's a lot of room that becomes in disarray after the chaos of the rift in space. And I found that some of the treasure boxes were also caught up in the flow. So all I had to do was scour the entire Red Ravine and pick them up. He didn't think he'd be this grateful for Fudge being so nosy. But in this case, it was an absolute win. Was there any more? He asked. Fudge shook his head. No, master. Because of the chaos in space, the entire Red Ravine has become unstable. Almost all the companies have already left the place, including the major factions in Metropolis. It seemed that by Kuno summoning him created a lot more chaos than he could have ever imagined. But if his guess was right and that he was forcefully transported to the Elven Kingdom, then it would make sense why there was so much chaos that happened. I guess it's time to go home, he said. Yes, finally. Jaku cheered. Michael transported everyone back to the nation of Reborn to regroup. Once they landed on the Rebornian mansion's courtyard, Shina immediately clapped her hands and rallied her siblings. Okay, it's time for practice. What? Zion shouted. We just got home. Nope. I want to sleep, Jaku said, already sleepwalking towards his room. Shina didn't take no for an answer. You said that I can rely on you guys. How can I do that if you can't use any ability? So, we're spending all our time training. Zion and Jaku immediately bolted out, with Shina and Amisu chasing after them. Once Michael was alone, he brought out his drone and talked to it. Why didn't you come out? He asked. A second later, Kuno manifested out from the drone and landed on her feet. She had been staying in the drone's subspace all this time, simply observing everything that happened through the control room. I got shy, hee. Fudge immediately shook his head. A ninja shouldn't be shy. They should be proud. Come, I'll introduce you to the Dragonborns. They're nice. Kuno nodded. Yes, they did look nice. Maybe I will do that. But what? She then pointed upwards, seemingly pointing at the canopy's ceiling. I can't go outside, she said. Michael found this weird. Why? Kuno demonstrated by slowly walking towards the edge, where the shadow of the ceiling no longer blocked the sun's bright rays. As soon as her hand was illuminated by daylight, a sizzling sound echoed out as her hand got immediately burned, as if the sun's rays were literally scorching hot. You can't go out in the sun? Michael asked her. I don't think I can, she replied. Can't go out in the sun. Has blood powers. There's no way. Is she really the original vampire? However, that still didn't make any sense. After all, Guillermo and the other vampires could walk fine in the sun without their skin burning up. He found out from them that the usual clichés about vampires weren't entirely true. Nah, I'm overthinking it. Maybe it's just because she hasn't seen the light of day in 1,000 years, he guessed. He bent down and took out an umbrella from his inventory. Here, use this. Kuno fumbled around with the umbrella before she finally pushed on the button on the handle, opening it up. He showed her how to hold it properly, and she was able to finally walk out in the open without worry. Hee. This is nice, she said, twirling around with the umbrella. You should introduce yourself to Shina first. No, wait. Grieve first. Both of you have something in common, Fudge said, pushing Kuno by bumping into her legs. He led her into the Rebornian mansion where they all each had their own rooms. Fudge excitedly burst open the front door. However, Kuno didn't follow after him. What are you doing? Follow me, Junior, Fudge said, but Kuno wasn't budging. She remained in front of the doors, standing still. She raised her hand, trying to cross the boundary, but as soon as she did, her hand got burned again, causing her to recoil. Ah! There seemed to be an invisible barrier that prevented her from entering inside. Why aren't you following me? Come inside, said Fudge. And finally, after saying those magical words, Kuno finally felt the barrier disappear, allowing her to tumble inside the Rebornian mansion for the first time. She can't enter any private premises until she's invited? The more she learned about Kuno, the more accurate his guesses became. Is she really? No, that's way too coincidental. How could I meet the original vampire just a month after finding out about her existence? Hee, you'll meet everyone at dinner, Fudge said excitedly. There's lots of good food to eat like pizza, fried chicken, and garlic bread. Kuno suddenly covered her mouth and nose. Garlic. After being released into the world after 1,000 years of being chained and trapped inside a Gothic castle, Kuno remembered that couldn't go out into the sun without burning her skin. She couldn't enter into someone's home without their express invitation, and she couldn't stand the sight of garlic. The only thing she needed was an insatiable need for blood. Then she'd be the textbook definition of a vampire. Master, we're going out for a walk, Fudge said, while being hugged by Kuno. Kuno was in full gear. A long-sleeved shirt, long pants, socks, closed shoes, a giant wide-brimmed hat, and even a mask to cover half her face. And if that wasn't enough, she was carrying the biggest umbrella that Michael had ever seen before. This place is so interesting, Kuno said, looking around the bustling streets of the nation of Reborn. Even if I'm afraid of the sun, I can't wait until nighttime to explore. Seeing her excited expression, he couldn't really deny her wish. He just hoped that it wasn't Fudge who would be guiding her. After all, the little slime had a tendency of influencing people into becoming troublemakers with him. Unfortunately, the Dragonborns were busy training, with Shina pushing her siblings to awaken their abilities as fast as possible. There were some other people that could become Kuno's guide, but since she was more comfortable with Fudge, then it would be better if he led the way. He was planning on having somebody else keep Fudge in check, but he knew that it would be useless. Maybe an innocent Rebornian would also become influenced by Fudge. Just don't cause too much trouble, okay? He asked them. Yes, Master. We're just going to go around the nation of Reborn, nothing special. Kuno nodded with him. For some reason, he doubted that. But either way, he couldn't come with them because he was also busy doing his own thing. So while Kuno and Fudge went on their tour, he busied himself with all the things he had to take care of. First and foremost was his own cultivation. Although it had only been 3 months tops after his advancement to the 4th stage of body formation, he felt like it had been ages since he had broken through. With strong competition like the major factions, he knew that he could always use more power. But the problem, of course, was his Godforge pieces. For some reason, he was the only one among them who needed a lot of Godforge pieces. And by a lot, he meant 3 times more. A normal magnetic would only need 5 kilograms of Godforge pieces in order to advance to the 5th stage of body formation. But for him, it would take him a whopping 15 kilograms. That was insane. If he wanted to buy it using sand dollars, then it would cost him 150,000 in total. And it would only continue to go up as he advanced through the body formation stages. This was why he hadn't spent a single sand dollar purchasing Godforge pieces. He almost shuddered at the thought of spending that much just to achieve the same advancement as others. But I shouldn't complain. The large requirement for Godforge probably contributes to the fact that I have a much stronger power than other magnetics. As shown in the auction, he could defeat magnetics 3 to 4 stages above his own. So all in all, spending 3 times as much as other people was still worth it. Still, I don't want to pay that much every time I want to advance. My only choice is to try and find more discoveries like the one in the Red Ravine. Thanks to Fudge, He did obtain the 15 kilograms he needed to advance. But he'd have to find 18 more kilograms if he wanted to advance to the 6th stage after that. There's a better solution to that, you know. Just find some unsuspecting magnetic and rip his Godforge piece away from his heart. As a natural magnetic, Godforge pieces had a tendency of becoming attracted to him, whether he liked it or not. And this proved to be useful, as that was how he advanced to this level without having to purchase his own. But all his unsuspecting donors were people that were not so good people. They were people who didn't deserve to have a reality-bending power at their disposal, as it would only enable them to cause even more harm. That was why he didn't bat an eye when he stole their Godforge pieces. I would rather spend sand dollars than steal an innocent person's Godforge. Then find someone not so innocent, Harbinger quickly quipped. I'm sure if you just walk around cities and towns, you'll eventually find someone who doesn't like the way you walk. Harbinger's solution was to just let the villains come to him, which wasn't all that bad of an idea, to be honest. But he wouldn't pick a fight just to steal their Godforge pieces. If they challenged him, then he would gladly take it. That was the only situation he'd be okay with. Let's not worry about the future. What's important is the present. He sat down on his floor and put down all the boxes they found in the Red Ravine. All of this totaled 15 kilograms, enough for him to finally advance. He picked one up and twisted its top. The frame became bent and revealed an open face. The white flames of the Godforge pieces flickered in his presence. It was as if it knew that there was someone near that could finally touch its flames without getting hurt. He began unboxing the rest of the boxes, letting all 15 kilograms of Godforge pieces see the open air. Then finally he raised his hand. And not even a second later, the droplets of Godforge pieces inside the box started levitating upwards. As they moved closer and closer to him, its speed became faster and faster. And once they were finally out of the box, they suddenly shot towards his chest at an even faster speed than a bullet. Thankfully, he was already prepared for this, so he wasn't thrown backwards like the previous times. The drops coalesced into one giant drop before harmlessly passing through his chest, into his muscles, onto his muscles, and navigating through his organs until they finally met his beating heart. The top part of his heart was covered in a shiny, metallic sheen. Those were his Godforge pieces. And right now, they were pulsating with ability power as if they were beckoning these newcomers into joining them. The droplet splashed into the surfaces of his heart, finally integrating itself onto his body. Immediately, he felt warmth spread throughout his body. The new Godforge pieces were very active, supplying him with tons of ability power. And surprisingly enough, he noticed that the power given off by old Godforge pieces had increased as well. This advancement didn't create an addition of power. It was multiplication. Just then, Harbinger manifested above his head. And it seemed that this new advancement allowed its two arms to finally connect. Harbinger's upper body was finally revealing.